Hello guys, this is your friend Multiverse Shinobi 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto? The Lost Yonko, the Ultimate One Piece Crossover Part 1. Chapter 1. The Fall of the Golden Flash. The air atop the red line was thin, cold, and carried the metallic scent of impending rain. Marineford stood in the distance, a fortress of white stone that promised absolute justice to a world drowning in chaos. But inside the walls of the Vice Admiral's quarters, justice felt like a hollow word. Monkey D. Minato, known to the world as the Yellow Flash of the Marines, stared at his reflection in the window. He was young, the youngest admiral candidate in history, with spiky blonde hair and a face that still held the remnants of a kind smile. But his eyes were tired. "You're quiet today, Minato," a gravelly voice broke the silence. Minato turned. Standing there was his father, Monkey D. Garp. The hero of the Marines looked older than usual, his massive arms crossed over a chest decorated with medals that felt more like shackles today. "I saw the files, Dad," Minato said, his voice a low whisper. "The Buster Call for the land of whirlpools. The Uzumaki clan, they aren't pirates. They are scholars, smiths, and our allies. Why is the world government targeting them?" Garp closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "The five elders have deemed their sealing techniques a threat to the balance. They know too much about the void history. Minato, don't go. If you interfere, you'll be branded a traitor." Minato gripped the hilt of his blade, Ashura, a legendary sword given to him by a mysterious traveler. "If being a Marine means watching my wife's homeland burn, then I don't want to be a Marine." The massacre of Uzushiogakure. The sea around the land of whirlpools was churning with blood and oil. 10 Marine battleships surrounded the island, their cannons roaring in a rhythmic symphony of destruction. In the center of the burning capital, Uzumaki Kushina stood her ground. Her long red hair whipped around her like 9 tails of fire. In her arms, she clutched a newborn bundle wrapped in orange cloth. A baby boy with 3 distinct whisker marks on his cheeks. "Stay quiet, Naruto," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mama is here." Suddenly, the ground shook. A figure emerged from the smoke, leaning on a cane. His presence was poisonous, a suffocating pressure that made the nearby Marine soldiers collapse in fear. Saint J. Garcia Saturn, one of the 5 elders. "The Uzumaki bloodline ends tonight," Saturn said, his voice echoing like grinding stones. "And the child you carry will never see the dawn." He raised his hand. A dark, demonic energy gathered at his fingertips. He fired a beam of pure malice. Kushina closed her eyes, shielding Naruto with her body. Zap! A flash of brilliant yellow light blinded everyone. Saturn's beam hit a wall of golden energy and dissipated. Standing in front of Kushina was Minato, his marine coat torn and discarded on the floor. He didn't look like an admiral. He looked like a god of war. "Minato!" Kushina gasped, blood trickling from her mouth. She had already been wounded by the initial bombardment. Minato didn't look back. His eyes were fixed on the elder. "You touch my family, and I will tear the red line down with my bare hands." The duel of the gods. The clash that followed was not a battle, it was a disaster. Minato moved faster than the human eye, or even the most advanced observation haki, could track. He was a blur of yellow light, his sword Ashura clashing against Saturn's demonic limbs. "Insolent worm," Saturn roared, transforming into his nightmarish Ushi Oni form. Minato dodged a strike that leveled a mountain behind him. He spun in midair, his hand glowing with a swirling sphere of blue energy, a technique he had perfected by mimicking the rotation of the ocean's whirlpools. Rosin flash. The impact sent Saturn flying back into the sea, the elder coughing up black blood. But Minato knew he couldn't win a war of attrition. More ships were coming. The island was sinking. Kushina reached out, grabbing Minato's hand. Her strength was fading. "Minato, take him. Go to your father. Only he can hide him. The world isn't ready for our son yet. I'm not leaving you," Minato cried, tears finally breaking through his stoic mask. "You must." She smiled, a beautiful, tragic expression. Live for him. Change the world from the shadows, so he can one day walk in the light. With a final, desperate burst of her adamantine chains, Kushina held back the approaching CP0 agents, giving Minato the opening he needed. The promise. That night, a small boat met a lone marine ship in the middle of a storm. Garp stood on the deck, his face wet with rain and tears. Minato stepped aboard, holding a sleeping Naruto. His clothes were soaked in blood, none of it his own. She's gone, Dad, Minato said, his voice hollow. The government, they aren't the protectors. They are the monsters. Garp took the baby, looking down at Naruto's innocent face. What will you do now, Minato? I'm going to find Dragon, Minato said, looking toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise over the wreckage of his life. We're going to build an army. We're going to start a revolution. Minato leaned down and kissed Naruto's forehead. Grow strong, my son. Be the bridge I couldn't be. Find your own justice. With a final flash of yellow light, Minato vanished into the mist. Garp looked at the horizon and then at the baby. Naruto, you and Luffy, the two of you are going to be a real headache for the world, aren't you? Biwahaha. But as Garp laughed, he gripped the railing so hard the steel turned to dust. The will of D had just been ignited in a way the world would never forget. Chapter 2. The Monsters of MT. Corvo. The winds of Dawn Island were far gentler than the raging gales of the New World, but for Curly Dayton, the mountain bandit queen, they brought nothing but a headache. Garp. You senile old fool. Get back here. Dayton stood at the entrance of her wooden hideout, shaking her fist at the retreating back of Vice Admiral Garp. He had just dropped off a second bundle of chaos. A few years prior, it had been Ace. A few months ago, Luffy. And now, he had returned with a blonde toddler who had strange whisker marks on his cheeks. Take care of him, Dayton. Garp's laughter echoed through the forest. He's my grandson too. Train him well, or I'll throw you and impel down. Dayton looked down at the two small boys sitting in the dirt. Luffy, age 7, was picking his nose and staring blankly at a beetle. Naruto, age 6.5, was looking around the forest with eyes that were far too blue and far too focused. Listen up, you runts, Dayton growled, lighting a cigarette. In this house, you work or you don't eat. I'm not your nanny. Naruto stood up, dusting off his orange shorts. He didn't look intimidated. Old lady, where's the food? And where's the guy who can teach me how to swing a sword? Luffy jumped up, his eyes widening. A sword, Naruto, that's so cool. I'm gonna be a pirate, and pirates need swords. Wait, no, I'm gonna be a pirate who uses his fists. Like Gigi. Pirates. Dayton shrieked. Don't say that word. If Garp hears you, he'll kill us all. The encounter with Ace. Life on MT. Corvo was a daily battle for survival. The forest was inhabited by giant tigers, massive bears, and a 10-year-old boy named Ace who hated the world. For weeks, Luffy and Naruto followed Ace into the woods, desperate for a friend. Ace would throw boulders at them, lead them into beehives, and drop them off cliffs. Go away, Ace yelled from a high branch. I don't need brothers. I don't need anyone. Luffy, being made of rubber, simply bounced back up. Let's be friends, Ace. Naruto, however, didn't just bounce back. He landed on his feet, his breathing heavy. Something was changing inside him. Ever since he had eaten that strange, swirling orange fruit Garp had found in a pirate's treasure chest, he felt a heat in his gut that wouldn't go away. I'm not following you because I'm lonely, Naruto said, looking up at Ace. I'm following you because you look like you're carrying a heavy burden. My dad told me that brothers share the weight. Ace froze. Your dad, Garp? No. Naruto's voice went quiet. My dad, he's out there. Somewhere. Fighting to make the world better. And until he comes back, I have to get strong. The awakening of the Zenko. One afternoon, disaster struck. Luffy had wandered too close to the territory of the Great Forest Lord, a tiger the size of a small house. Luffy, run! Naruto screamed. But Luffy tripped over a root. The tiger roared, its massive claws swiping down. Luffy braced himself, closing his eyes. Boom. The impact didn't hit Luffy. Instead, a shockwave of red energy exploded through the clearing. Naruto stood in front of Luffy, but he didn't look like a boy anymore. A bubbling, translucent red aura coated his body. His fingernails had turned into claws, and his eyes were a terrifying slit red. A single tail made of pure energy flickered behind him. The Inu Inu no Mi, mythical model, Zenko, the celestial fox, was reacting to his protective instinct. Don't touch my brother. Naruto growled, his voice sounding like two voices overlapping. The tiger, a predator that feared nothing, took a step back. It sensed something ancient and apex in the small child. Naruto lunged. He didn't have a sword yet, but his hands moved like flashes of fire. With a single strike, he sent the massive beast flying through 3 trees. The red aura vanished, and Naruto collapsed, unconscious. The sake of brotherhood. A few days later, after Naruto had recovered, Ace finally stopped running away. He led the 2 younger boys to a hidden cliffside overlooking the sea. He had stolen 4 small ceramic cups and a bottle of sake from Dayton's stash. A 4th boy joined them, Sabo, the noble who had fled the city to find freedom in the trash heaps. You guys are persistent, Ace said, pouring the liquid into the cups. If we share this drink, we become brothers. It doesn't matter what our blood is. It doesn't matter who our fathers were. They clinked their cups together. To the future, Luffy shouted. I'm gonna be the Pirate King. I'm gonna find out the truth of this world, Sabo smiled. I'm gonna be the strongest, Ace declared. Naruto looked at his cup, then at the horizon where his father had disappeared years ago. I'm going to bring peace. I'll be the one who stands between the world and the people who want to burn it. The training of the hero. Garp's visits were the stuff of nightmares. He didn't bring toys, he brought fists of love. Biwahaha. You called it a punch, Luffy. You're too soft. Garp shouted, sending Luffy crashing into a mountain. He turned to Naruto, who was practicing with a heavy wooden practice sword. And you, Naruto, that fruit you ate, it's not just a power-up. It's a responsibility. The Zenko is a guardian spirit. If you can't control your heart, the fox will eat you from the inside out. Garp lunged at Naruto. Naruto swung the wooden sword, coated in a faint red glow. Crack. The wooden sword shattered against Garp's hockey-coated fist. Naruto was sent tumbling back, but he landed in a crouch. I'm not gonna let it eat me, Gigi. Naruto panted, his eyes blue and determined. I'm gonna use this power to protect Luffy and Ace. And one day, I'm gonna beat you. Garp paused, a wide, proud grin crossing his face. He saw Minato's speed and Kushina's fire in the boy. Then you'd better start training harder, brat. Because the world out there, it doesn't give second chances. As the sun set over Mt. Corvo, the 4 brothers sat on the roof of Dayton's hut, unaware that the gears of the world were already turning. In the shadows of the red line, the elders were whispering about the yellow flash's spawn. And in the Revolutionary Army, a man in a green cloak looked at the moon, wondering if his son was ready for the storm that was coming. Chapter 3. The Black Blade and the Avenger. 10 years had passed since the sake cups clinked on the cliffs of Mt. Corvo. The boys had grown into young men, tempered by the harsh winters and Garp's relentless fists of love. Luffy had set sail 6 months prior, leaving with a wide grin and a small rowing boat. Now, it was Naruto's turn. He stood at the docks of Fuchsia village, but he wasn't leaving in a dinghy. He had spent years restoring a sleek, black-timbered sloop he had named the Whirlwind Fox. Strapped to his back was Ashura, the blade his father had left behind. Its hilt was wrapped in aged bandages, and its guard was shaped like a swirling vortex. Remember, Naruto, Garp shouted from the shore, picking his ear. If you cause too much trouble, I'll have to hunt you down myself. You'll have to catch me first, Gigi. Naruto laughed, unfurling the orange sail. Next time we meet, I'm bringing the world's peace to your doorstep. The island of iron, Tetsujima. Naruto's first stop was a jagged, metallic island in the East Blue known for its legendary blacksmiths and its cutthroat bounty hunters. Tetsujima was a place where strength was the only currency. As Naruto walked through the smoke-filled market of the main port, he noticed the atmosphere was tense. People were whispering about a demon who had arrived a few days ago, a swordsman who was hunting down every pirate crew that docked. Naruto entered a local tavern, the Rusty Anchor, and ordered a bowl of ramen. Just as he took his first bite, the doors swung open. A young man walked in. He wore a high-collared blue shirt with a strange fan symbol on the back, a red and white crest. He had raven black hair that fell over his eyes and a long, straight-edged katana strapped to his waist. His gaze was cold, sharp enough to cut the air. "You," the black-haired teen said, his voice like ice. He was looking directly at Naruto. Naruto swallowed his noodles. "Me. That sword on your back. It's not a toy. A brat like you doesn't deserve to carry a master-grade blade." Naruto grinned, leaning back. "And I suppose you think you're the one who deserves it, Sasuke Uchiha. I've heard of you. The bounty hunter who never misses a mark." Sasuke's eyes narrowed. "I don't care about bounties. I care about power. And your sword looks like it has plenty of it." Chidori vs. Foxfire. They met on the desolate plateaus behind the town, where the ground was made of scrap metal and rusted iron. A storm was brewing overhead, matching the electricity between the two warriors. "I have a goal," Sasuke said, drawing his blade, the Kusanagi. "I must find a certain man and kill him. To do that, I need to test myself against the strongest. You smell like the Grand Line." Naruto unsheathed Ashura. The blade didn't shine, it seemed to swallow the light around it. "I'm going to be the man who changes this era. If you're looking for a test, Sasuke, you just found the final exam." Sasuke moved first. He was a blur of speed, his blade flickering like a serpent's tongue. Naruto parried, the clash of steel ringing out like a thunderclap. "Chidori! Nagashi!" Sasuke cried. Bolts of blue electricity surged through Sasuke's sword and onto Naruto's blade. Normally, the shock would paralyze a man instantly. But Naruto's skin began to glow with a faint, bubbling red aura. Foxfire style. Burning vortex. Naruto spun, his blade erupting in crimson flames that consumed the electricity. The explosion sent both boys skidding back. Sasuke's eyes changed. His pupils turned blood red with 3 black dots spinning around the center. "The Sharingan," Naruto whispered. "Garp told me about your clan. The eyes that see through all deception. If you know about them, then you know you've already lost," Sasuke hissed, his speed doubling. The common enemy. The duel was interrupted by a massive shadow looming over the plateau. A fleet of 3 ships, flying the flag of the Gargoyle Pirates, had anchored in the bay. "Lord Gargoyle," a scout shouted from the distance. "There they are. The blonde kid with the high bounty father and the Uchiha survivor. If we take their heads to the Marines, we'll be rich." A massive man, nearly 10 feet tall and covered in iron armor, stepped forward. He swung a spiked mace that shattered a nearby rock. "Forget the Marines. I want their swords." Naruto and Sasuke stood back to back, their previous animosity momentarily shelved. "He's annoying," Sasuke muttered, his Sharingan tracking the 50 pirates rushing toward them. "Tell you what," Naruto grinned, cracking his knuckles as the red aura intensified, a single fox tail flicking behind him. "Whoever takes down the most pirates gets to call the shots on the ship." Sasuke scoffed. "As if I'd ever join your crew, loser." "We'll see." Rasen Ryu. Naruto lunged, a spinning sphere of wind and fire forming in his palm, while Sasuke's hand crackled with the sound of 1,000 chirping birds. The Maelstrom of Justice had officially begun. Chapter 4. The Uzumaki Uchiha Alliance. The plateau of Tetsujima erupted into a symphony of steel and screams. The Gargoyle Pirates, a crew known for their ruthless pillaging of the East Blue's smithies, found themselves caught between 2 monsters of a different breed. Lord Gargoyle swung his massive iron mace, crushing the earth where Naruto had stood a millisecond before. Stay still, you golden brat. I'll crush that D right out of your name. Naruto flipped through the air, his movements fluid and erratic like a flickering flame. You're too slow, big guy. My Gigi hits 10 times harder than that, and he does it while eating crackers. The dance of crowds. While Naruto distracted the captain, Sasuke was a whirlwind of precision. He moved through the ranks of the pirate fodder like a ghost. His Sharingan predicted every sword swing, every gunshot, and every desperate lunge before they even happened. Fire! A pirate shouted, aiming a flintlock. Sasuke didn't even look. He tilted his head an inch to the left, the bullet whistling past his ear. In the same motion, his blade flashed. 3 pirates fell, their weapons severed. Pathetic, Sasuke muttered. He sheathed his sword halfway, then slammed his palm into the ground. Chidori stream. Blue lightning branched out across the metallic soil of the island. The pirates, standing on conductive iron-rich earth, were seized by violent tremors as the electricity cooked their nerves. Don't get cocky, Uchiha. Naruto's voice boomed from above. Naruto had channeled his Zenko fruit's energy into his feet, propelling himself high into the sky. He held out his hand, and the air began to scream. A sphere of pure, compressed wind began to rotate violently in his palm, infused with the orange-red heat of the fox's soul. Mythical art. Fox Fire Rasengan. Naruto dived like a falling meteor. He slammed the sphere directly into Lord Gargoyle's iron chest plate. The metal groaned, then turned white-hot before shattering into 1,000 fragments. The pirate captain was launched backward, crashing through his own ship's mast in the harbor below. The aftermath. The remaining pirates fled in terror, leaving their captain unconscious in the wreckage of his pride. Silence returned to the plateau, save for the crackling of fires and the distant sound of the sea. Naruto panted, the red aura fading from his skin. He looked at Sasuke, who was calmly wiping a single drop of blood off his blade. I counted 27, Sasuke said coolly. What? No way. I took out the captain and at least 30 of the guys around him. Naruto protested, waving his arms. Quantity doesn't equal quality, Dobi, loser. Your movements are loud and wasteful. Oh yeah, well, my loud movements just saved us a lot of trouble, Mr. Broody. Naruto walked up to Sasuke, his expression shifting from competitive to serious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper, a wanted poster. It wasn't for a pirate. It was for a man with long, dark hair and eyes that matched Sasuke's. Uchiha Itachi. Sasuke's eyes widened, his hand instinctively gripping his sword. Where did you get that? I found it in my dad's old files, Naruto said quietly. Itachi isn't just a criminal, Sasuke. He's being tracked by the Revolutionary Army and the world government for different reasons. My dad, he's looking for him too. Sasuke's gaze darkened. I don't care who is looking for him. He belongs to me. I will be the one to end him. Then you're gonna need a ship that can survive the Grand Line, Naruto said, gesturing to the whirlwind fox anchored in the bay. And you're gonna need a captain who isn't afraid of the gods themselves. I'm going to the top, Sasuke. I'm going to sit on the empty throne and tell the world to be free. If your brother is in the way of that, we'll find him together. The first bounty. As the sun began to set, a news coup bird flew overhead, dropping a bundle of fresh newspapers. Naruto caught one and opened it. His jaw dropped. On the front page was a grainy photo of Naruto slamming the Rasengan into Gargoyle, with Sasuke's lightning clearing the field in the background. Wanted. Dead or alive. Whirlwind. Monkey D. Naruto. Bounty. 15 million berries. Demon Eye. Sasuke Uchiha. Bounty. 12 million berries. 15 million. Naruto cheered, jumping up and down. I'm worth more than you, Sasuke. Ha. The captain leads the way. Sasuke looked at his own poster, a small, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. They gave you a higher bounty because you're more annoying. It's a nuisance tax. Hey, come back here and say that. As the two rivals turned allies boarded the Whirlwind Fox, the sails caught the wind. They weren't just two boys anymore, they were a crew. And in the distance, the fog of the East Blue began to lift, revealing the path toward a town known for a certain clown, and a girl who hated pirates. Chapter 5. The Thief and the Clown. The Whirlwind Fox sliced through the turquoise waters of the East Blue with an elegance that belied the two chaotic souls on board. Naruto was perched on the figurehead, a carved fox with 9 wooden tails, squinting at the horizon. Sasuke sat on the deck, meticulously sharpening his blade with a whetstone, the rhythm steady and cold. "I smell smoke," Naruto said suddenly, his nose twitching. The Zenko fruit didn't just give him speed, it gave him the heightened senses of a predator. And gunpowder. Lots of it. Orange Town, Sasuke muttered, glancing at a map. It's supposed to be a peaceful trading port. If there's gunpowder, there's trouble. Trouble is just another word for adventure, Sasuke. Turn the rudder. The girl who cried pirate. As they approached the harbor of Orange Town, the sky was stained with orange embers. The town was eerily silent, except for the occasional boom of a cannon echoing from the central plaza. Suddenly, a small orange-haired girl came sprinting toward the docks, clutching a bundle of maps to her chest. Behind her, 3 burly pirates with face paint were gaining ground. "Get back here, you little thief!" one of the pirates roared. The girl turned a corner and ran straight into Naruto, who had just hopped off his boat. She didn't fall. She grabbed Naruto's shoulders and put on a terrified face that could win an award. "Boss, you're finally here," she cried, pointing at the pirates. "I got the map like you asked, but these guys are being mean." Naruto blinked. "Boss, wait, I don't." The pirates skidded to a halt. "So, you're her accomplice? You don't look like much, kid. Hand over the map to Captain Buggy, or we'll blow you to bits." Sasuke stepped off the boat, his hand resting on the hilt of Kusanagi. "She's lying. Look at her eyes, she's sizing up our boat's value while she talks." The girl, Nami, flinched for a split second before going back to her act. "How rude. I'm just a helpless girl caught in a pirate war. I don't care if she's lying or not," Naruto said, his eyes turning sharp. He looked at the pirates. "You mentioned Captain Buggy. Is he the one causing all that smoke?" "That's right. The most flashiest pirate in the world. And he hates people who don't laugh at his jokes." Naruto cracked his knuckles. A faint red steam began to rise from his skin. "I'm not much of a comedian. Sasuke, take the girl to the ship. I'm gonna go see this clown." The flashy execution. In the center of Orange Town, a man with a giant red nose and a captain's coat was sitting on a throne made of rubble. This was Buggy the Clown, a man who had once sailed on the ship of the Pirate King himself, though he would never admit it to a brat like Naruto. "Flashy. Fire the buggy ball." Buggy screamed. A massive cannonball, marked with his Jolly Roger, leveled a row of houses. Buggy cackled, but his laughter was cut short when a blonde blur landed on the barrel of his cannon. "Nice nose," Naruto said, grinning. "Is it real, or is it a tomato?" The silence that followed was deafening. Buggy's face turned a shade of purple that matched his hair. You called my nose a tomato? I mean, it's round. It's red. Looks pretty squishy to me," Naruto teased, intentionally drawing Buggy's ire. He wanted to see what this man was capable of. "Bara bara ho." Buggy's hand suddenly detached from his wrist and flew toward Naruto's throat, clutching a set of knives. Naruto leaned back, his reflexes amplified by the Zenko soul. "Whoa, a devil fruit user. I'm the master of the bara bara no mi. I'm a splitting human. You can't cut me, you can't break me." Buggy's body began to dismantle into dozens of floating pieces, encircling Naruto like a swarm of angry hornets. The Whirlwind vs. the Splitter. From a rooftop nearby, Sasuke watched the fight, his Sharingan active. Nami stood beside him, her jaw dropped. "Why aren't you helping him?" she asked. "That's a devil fruit, Captain. Your friend is going to get shredded." "He's not my friend," Sasuke said coldly, though his eyes never left Naruto. And watch closely, thief. That loser is far more dangerous than a circus act. In the plaza, Naruto was dodging hundreds of floating limbs. Buggy was laughing, his head floating high in the air. You can't hit what isn't together, brat. I'm invincible. Maybe, Naruto said, stopping in his tracks. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling the air currents. But everything that's split still has a center. Naruto's blue eyes snapped open, now glowing with a feral orange light. He didn't reach for his sword. Instead, he held out both hands. Wind style. Vacuum vortex. Naruto began to spin his body at incredible speed. The wind around him whipped into a localized cyclone. Because Buggy's body parts were light and floating, they were instantly sucked into the vacuum of the whirlwind. Wait. Stop. My feet. My torso. I'm getting dizzy. Buggy's various parts tumbled helplessly inside the wind tunnel. Naruto stopped spinning and caught Buggy's floating head by the hair. He looked the clown captain in the eye. You have a map of the Grand Line, don't you? Give it to me, and I won't tie your feet to a news-coup bird and send them to the North Pole. You brat. You wouldn't dare. Sasuke. Get the rope. Naruto yelled. The unlikely trio. 10 minutes later, Buggy was stuffed into a small wooden crate, with only his head, hands, and feet sticking out in the wrong places. Naruto walked back to the docks, tossing a gold-rimmed compass and a sea chart into the air. Nami looked at the map, then at Naruto. You actually beat him. And you didn't even use your sword. He was all talk. Naruto shrugged. So, Nami, right. You're a navigator. We're a crew with a ship but no idea where we're going. How about a deal? Nami crossed her arms. I hate pirates. They took everything from my village. We're not pirates, Naruto said, his voice turning uncharacteristically soft. He pointed to the whirlwind symbol on his sail, which looked like the Uzumaki crest. We're explorers of justice. My dad is a revolutionary, and his dad is a marine. We're just the guys in the middle trying to fix the mess. Sasuke stepped forward. We're going to the Grand Line. If you want to get rich and stay alive, you need us. And we need someone who can read the clouds. Nami looked at the two of them, the fiery blonde and the icy swordsman. She sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. Fine. But I'm in charge of the money. If we lose even one berry, I'm throwing you both overboard. Deal. Naruto cheered. Next stop. Syrup Village. I heard there's a guy there who tells great stories. Chapter 6. The Liar and the Shadows. The whirlwind fox glided toward the shores of the Gecko Islands. With Nami's expert navigation, they had bypassed the jagged reefs that usually claimed unsuspecting merchant ships. I'm telling you, Naruto, if you keep eating the emergency rations, I'm going to start charging you interest. Nami yelled, waving a logbook at the blonde captain. But Nami, the Zenko fruit makes me super hungry. Naruto complained, his stomach let out a roar that rivaled a sea king. Sasuke, leaning against the mast, didn't look up from the scroll he was reading. Be quiet. We're being watched. As the boat hit the sandy shore of Syrup Village, a loud, trembling voice echoed from the cliffs above. Halt. I am the great Captain Usopp, leader of a fleet of 8,000 men. If you take one more step, my army will rain boulders upon your heads. Naruto squinted. On the ridge, he saw a single long-nosed teenager shaking behind a row of poorly placed wooden cutouts. 8,000 men, huh? Naruto grinned, his eyes flashing blue. Hey Sasuke, can your Sharingan see 8,000 people? I see one idiot and 3 terrified children hiding in the bushes, Sasuke replied flatly. Naruto laughed and jumped onto the shore. Hey, Captain Usopp, we're looking for a shipwright and some meat. You want to come down and negotiate, or should I come up there? Usopp, realizing his bluff was blown, tumbled down the cliff in a cloud of dust. Ahem, it seems my men are on their lunch break. I suppose I can handle you myself. The shadow in the mansion. Usopp led them to a small tavern, spinning tall tales of battling giant goldfish the size of islands. While Naruto was mesmerized, Sasuke remained suspicious. He had noticed a strange man in a black suit, Klahadore, the butler of the local mansion, watching them from a distance. That butler, Sasuke whispered to Naruto. His footsteps are silent, too silent for a servant. Naruto nodded, his own predatory senses tingling. Yeah, he smells like old blood and cold steel. That night, Naruto and Usopp overheard a conversation near the cliffs. Klahadore was talking to a man with heart-shaped glasses, Django the hypnotist. Tomorrow morning, Klahadore hissed, his glasses glinting in the moonlight. The Black Cat pirates will storm the shore. We kill the girl, Kaya, and I inherit the fortune. My days as a peaceful butler are over. I will reclaim my name as Captain Kuro of 1,000 Plans. Usopp gasped, accidentally snapping a twig. Who's there? Kuro's head snapped toward the bushes. The speed of 1,000 Plans. Before Kuro could move, a streak of yellow gold light landed between him and Usopp. Naruto stood there, Ashura still in its sheath, but a heavy pressure was radiating from him. So, the butler is a cat in disguise, Naruto said, his voice dropping an octave. Kuro adjusted his glasses with the palm of his hand, a strange habit. You must be the whirlwind from the papers. 15 million is a decent prize, but you're in my way. In a blur, Kuro disappeared. He used Soru, the high-speed movement of the CP9, though he called it Shikushi. He moved so fast he couldn't even see what he was hitting. He simply slashed everything in his path with his 10-inch finger claws. Slash. The trees behind Naruto were shredded. But Naruto didn't move. He closed his eyes, sensing the vibrations in the air. Too fast for the eye, maybe, Naruto whispered. But the wind tells me exactly where you are. Naruto pivoted on his heel. He didn't draw his sword, he simply stuck out his leg. Clang. Kuro's stomach hit Naruto's shin with the force of a speeding carriage. The pirate captain was sent skidding across the grass, coughing. Impossible. Kuro gasped. No one in the East Blue can track my speed. My dad was the yellow flash, Naruto said, a red aura beginning to bubble around him. One tail of energy flickered behind him. You're fast, but you're just a house cat compared to a fox. The brave warriors stand. The next morning, the Black Cat pirates arrived at the shore, but they didn't find a helpless village. They found a trap. Usopp, inspired by Naruto's strength, stood his ground at the top of the slope, firing exploding stars from his slingshot. I won't let you hurt Kaya. I am a brave warrior of the sea. Sasuke stood at the bottom of the hill, his blade already drawn. As the pirates rushed forward, he didn't even use his hands. He infused his sword with lightning and swung. Uchiha style. Thunderclap. The shockwave paralyzed the first 20 pirates. Meanwhile, Naruto faced Kuro one last time. Kuro was desperate, moving in his Shikushi frenzy, slashing his own men in his madness. You don't care about your crew. Naruto growled, his eyes turning slit red. A captain who kills his own brothers doesn't deserve to sail the sea. Naruto vanished. He appeared directly in front of Kuro, grabbing the pirate's face. Rasengan. The spinning vortex of air slammed into Kuro, spiraling him through the air and out into the ocean. The 1,000 Plans had ended in a single, devastating rotation. A gift for the journey. In gratitude for saving the village and Lady Kaya, the group was given a parting gift. Not just supplies, but a new home. She's the going Mary, Usopp said, his eyes tearing up as he looked at the elegant caravel with a sheep's figurehead. Kaya wants you to have her. Naruto looked at the ship, then at Usopp, who was packing a small bag. Hey, Usopp, Naruto yelled, are you just gonna stand there, or are you gonna get on your ship? Usopp froze. My ship. I need a sniper, Naruto grinned. And someone who can tell the stories of our legends. Come on, brave warrior. The Grand Line is waiting. With a new ship and a new friend, the Whirlwind crew set sail. But as they left, Nami looked at the map with a worried expression. Next stop is the Bharati, she whispered. The floating restaurant. But we're entering the territory of the man who commands 5,000 pirates. Don Krieg. Sasuke looked at his blade. Let them come. I need a real challenge anyway. Chapter 7. The Floating Restaurant and the Hawkeye. The Going Merry sailed toward the center of the sea, where a giant, fish-shaped structure loomed on the horizon. This was the Baratie, the world-famous floating restaurant. Food. Naruto cheered, his stomach growling loud enough to shake the deck. I don't care if we're in the middle of a war zone, I need 5 bowls of miso pork ramen. Wait, do they serve ramen on a boat? It's a world-class restaurant, Naruto. Try to act like you have some class, Nami sighed, though she too was looking forward to a meal that wasn't dried jerky. As they docked, the atmosphere was chaotic. A massive, tattered galleon, the flagship of Don Krieg, the pirate admiral of the East Blue, lay broken nearby. It looked as if a giant beast had taken a single, clean bite out of the mountain-sized ship. The night of the kitchen. Inside the Baratie, the crew was met with the smell of spices and the sound of clashing plates. A blonde waiter with a curly eyebrow was currently kicking a group of unruly pirates out the door. A lady's appetite is sacred. The waiter yelled, his leg glowing with a strange friction. If you can't pay, you don't eat, unless you're starving, then I'll feed you for free, but then I'll kick your ass anyway. That's Sanji, Usopp whispered, leaning behind Naruto. I've heard the chefs here are all fighting cooks, who were former pirates. Naruto sat at the counter, eyes sparkling. Hey, Curly, give me everything you've got. Sanji turned, his eyes immediately drifting past Naruto to Nami. He slid across the floor as if on ice, a rose appearing out of nowhere. For the beautiful Nami Swan, the finest seafood risotto. And for the blonde brat, here's some leftover rice. Hey, Naruto yelled, but his anger vanished the moment he tasted the food. This is incredible. It's like a party in my mouth. The arrival of the king. Suddenly, a cold chill swept through the restaurant. The very air seemed to sharpen, making it hard to breathe. Outside, the fog parted. A small, coffin-shaped boat with black sails and green candles drifted toward the Baratie. Sitting on a throne-like chair was a man with a wide-brimmed hat and eyes that resembled a bird of prey, amber, piercing, and terrifying. Dracula, Hawkeye, Mihawk. The world's greatest swordsman. Sasuke, who had been silent the entire meal, stood up slowly. His hand was trembling, not from fear, but from an overwhelming surge of adrenaline. His Sharingan spun wildly in his eyes. So, Sasuke whispered, stepping out onto the Baratie's floating deck. The pinnacle of the world has finally appeared. Mihawk looked at the boy. He saw the Uchiha crest, the Kusanagi blade, and the raw, unrefined hunger for vengeance. You have the eyes of a hawk, boy, but the heart of a caged bird. Why do you seek me? To surpass you, Sasuke said, drawing his sword. Blue lightning began to coat the steel. Chidori katana. The gap between heaven and earth. Mihawk didn't even reach for the massive black blade, Yuru, on his back. Instead, he pulled out a tiny cross-shaped knife from around his neck. I don't hunt rabbits with a cannon, Mihawk said calmly. Sasuke lunged. He was a blur of speed and electricity, his blade aiming for Mihawk's throat. But no matter how fast Sasuke moved, the tiny knife was already there, parrying every strike with a flick of the wrist. Why can't I hit him? Sasuke growled, his Sharingan unable to find a single opening. You rely too much on your eyes and your hate, Mihawk said. He stepped forward and drove the tiny blade into Sasuke's chest, inches from his heart. If you truly wish to be strong, look at the world, not just your target. Sasuke didn't flinch. He grabbed the blade with his bare hand, blood dripping from his palm. I can't lose. Not here. Mihawk paused, impressed by the boy's resolve. He pulled the knife back and reached for the black handle behind his head. Very well. As a swordsman, I will show you the honor of the world's strongest black blade. Mihawk swung Yuru. It wasn't just a sword strike, it was a wall of green energy that split the ocean in two. Sasuke swung his own blade in a desperate counterattack, but the force was too great. Kusanagi snapped in half, and Sasuke was sent flying into the sea, a deep gash across his chest. The vow in the water. Sasuke. Naruto screamed. He dove into the water, ignoring the draining effect of the sea on his Zenko fruit. He pulled a bleeding, semi-conscious Sasuke back to the surface. Sasuke looked up at the sky, his pride shattered but his spirit ignited. He raised his broken sword toward the heavens. Naruto, can you hear me? I will never lose again. Until I defeat him and kill that man, I will not be defeated. Do you have a problem with that, Pirate King? Naruto grinned through his tears, holding his brother steady. Nope, no problem at all. Mihawk looked at the two of them, the blonde fox and the broken hawk. Grow strong, young ones. The Grand Line will chew you up if you stay this weak. I shall wait for you both at the top. As Mihawk drifted back into the fog, the restaurant was suddenly rocked by an explosion. Don Krieg, seeing his chance, had launched a gas attack. Looks like dinner is over, Naruto growled, the red aura bubbling around him. Sanji, you want to help us take out this trash? Sanji lit a cigarette, his eyes cold. My kitchen is a mess. Someone has to pay for the cleaning bill. Chapter 8. The Admiral of Ash. The Bharati was no longer a sanctuary of fine dining, it was a battlefield. Smoke from Don Krieg's poison gas bombs choked the air, and the wooden fins of the restaurant creaked under the weight of hundreds of armored pirates. Don Krieg stood on the deck of his ruined flagship, his gold-plated armor gleaming. He looked like a titan of industry and war. I am the ruler of the East Blue. I have 50 ships and 5,000 men. Even if a monster like Hawkeye broke my fleet, I will take this restaurant and sail back into the Grand Line. You talk a lot for a guy whose fleet just got deleted by one guy with a pocket knife, Naruto said, stepping onto the central platform. His red aura was thicker now, a second tail of energy beginning to flicker like a ghostly flame behind him. Beside him stood Sanji, his hands in his pockets, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Stay back, brat, Sanji said, his eyes fixed on Krieg's commander, Jin. This is my home. I'll handle the trash. We're a crew now, Sanji, Naruto replied, drawing Ashura. And on my ship, we share the chores. You handle the kitchen staff, I'll take the head chef of this pirate crew. The wall of steel. Don Krieg laughed, his eyes wide with arrogance. You think a sword can pierce my woot steel armor? I have every weapon known to man built into this suit. Krieg opened his shoulder plates, revealing a battery of gun barrels. Fire. A hail of bullets rained down. Sanji moved like a dancer, spinning on one leg to deflect the projectiles with the sheer force of his kicks. Naruto, however, didn't move. He held Ashura vertically. Uzumaki style. Vacuum wall. Naruto spun his blade so fast it created a localized pressure zone, sucking the bullets into a vortex and spitting them out into the sea. My turn, Naruto growled. He disappeared. Krieg's eyes couldn't track him, but his armored sensors picked up a heat signature. He swung his mighty battle spear, a weapon that exploded on contact. Boom. The explosion rocked the Bharati, but when the smoke cleared, Naruto was holding the spear's tip with his bare hand, the red chakra of the Zenko protecting his skin from the blast. Is that it? Naruto asked, his voice sounding deeper, more feral. You call this strength? You're just hiding behind a pile of junk. The Diable and the Rasengan. On the other side of the deck, Sanji was locked in a fierce duel with Jin. But as the fight intensified, Krieg grew impatient. He fired his MHB-5 poison gas bomb directly into the fray, caring nothing for his own loyal commander. Masks. Sanji yelled, throwing filters to the other chefs. But Naruto didn't need a mask. The Zenko energy was purifying the air around him, the golden red heat burning away the toxins. You really don't care about your friends, do you? Naruto's eyes were now fully slit red. The pressure he was emitting made the surrounding water boil. That's the one thing I can't forgive. Naruto lunged. At the same time, Sanji leapt into the air, his leg friction heating until it glowed a dull, angry red. Bow shot. Sanji's heel slammed into Krieg's reinforced helmet. Zenko Art. Twin Fox Rasengan. Naruto slammed two spinning spheres of compressed air and foxfire into Krieg's chest plate. The Woot steel, the strongest metal in the East Blue, began to crack. The rotation of the Rasengans acted like a drill, grinding through the gold and into the man beneath. Impossible. I am the Admiral. With a final roar, Naruto released the energy. Krieg was launched across the sea, skipping like a stone over the waves until he crashed into the horizon. A new cook in the galley. As the sun began to set, the Bharati chef stood in the wreckage, exhausted. Sasuke was bandaged up on the Going Merry, Usopp was busy repairing a hole in the deck, and Nami. Wait, Naruto said, looking at the spot where the Whirlwind Fox, their smaller scout boat, had been. Where's Nami? And the map? Sanji walked up, a bag of spices and a set of knives slung over his shoulder. She took the boat while you were fighting, Naruto. She was crying. Naruto's face fell, but then he gripped the hilt of Ashura. She's not a thief. She's a nakama. And if she's crying, it means someone is making her life miserable. He looked at Sanji. Are you coming? Or are you gonna stay here and wash dishes? Sanji looked back at the old head chef, Zeph, who was stubbornly pretending not to care. Oi, shitty geezer. Sanji yelled toward the restaurant. Thanks for everything. Zeph grunted. Don't catch a cold, you brat. Sanji turned to Naruto and smiled. I've always wanted to see the all blue. And every king needs a chef who knows how to handle a fox. Welcome to the crew, Sanji. Naruto cheered. Next stop, Arlong Park. It's time to bring our navigator home. Chapter 9. The Tears of a Navigator. The Going Merry cut through the waves with a heavy silence. The excitement of gaining Sanji as a cook was overshadowed by the empty spot on the deck where Nami used to stand. She headed for Kokoyashi village, Sanji said, staring at the horizon while lighting a cigarette. The rumors say that island is the Empire of Arlong. A fishman who believes humans are nothing more than cattle. Naruto sat on the sheep's head, his jaw clenched. I don't care if he's a fishman or a sea king. He took Nami's smile, and I'm going to take his head. The village of hidden scars. When they arrived at Kokoyashi, they didn't find a tropical paradise. They found a village under siege. Houses were flipped upside down, and the people walked with their heads bowed, fear etched into their skin. They found Nami in the center of the village, standing next to a mound of dirt. She was wearing an Arlong pirate's tattoo on her shoulder. Go away, Naruto, she screamed, her voice cracking. I told you, I was just using you. I've almost saved up 100 million berries. Once I pay Arlong, this village will be free. I don't need a group of justice explorers ruining my deal. 100 million, Usopp gasped. That would take a lifetime. Suddenly, a group of Marines, led by a corrupt officer named Nezumi, marched into the village. They headed straight for Nami's orange grove and began digging. We have a tip that there's stolen pirate treasure hidden here, Nezumi squeaked. As a Marine, I must confiscate it. Nami watched in horror as they unearthed the chest she had spent 8 years stealing and bleeding for. No. Stop. That's for the village. Arlong promised. Nezumi laughed. Arlong. What does a fishman's promise matter to the law? As the Marines marched away with the gold, the realization hit Nami like a physical blow. Arlong had sent the Marines. He never intended to let her go. He wanted his perfect cartographer to be his slave forever. Help me. Nami fell to her knees in the dirt. In a fit of despair, she grabbed a dagger and began stabbing at the Arlong tattoo on her arm, trying to tear the mark of her shame from her skin. Arlong, Arlong, Arlong. A hand reached out and caught her wrist. Naruto stood over her, his shadow blocking the sun. He didn't say a word. He simply took his straw-colored hat, the one Garp had given him, and placed it firmly on her head. Nami looked up, tears streaming down her face, her eyes searching his for any sign of judgment. Finding none, she finally let out a choked sob. Naruto, help me. Naruto's blue eyes turned a cold, piercing slit red. The ground beneath his feet cracked from the sheer pressure of his aura. Of course I will. He turned to the three men standing behind him. Sasuke, his chest still bandaged but his sword hand steady, Sanji, adjusting his tie, and Usopp, shaking but clutching his slingshot. Let's go, Naruto growled. We're going to destroy Arlong Park. The walk to Arlong Park. The four of them marched down the main road, a wall of focused fury. When they reached the gates of the massive, pagoda-style fortress, the fishmen laughed. Look at these puny humans. A fishman roared. Do you know who we are? We are 10 times stronger than you by birth. I don't care about your birth, Sasuke said, stepping forward. His Sharingan spun with a predatory hunger. I care about how fast you bleed. Sasuke moved like a lightning strike. In one fluid motion, he drew his broken kusanagi, now reinforced with steel from Tetsujima, and cut through the first rank of guards. Uchiha style. Shadow flickering. Sanji followed, his kicks breaking the ribs of the fishmen as if they were dry twigs. You touched a lady's heart with your filth. That's a sin that requires a fiery execution. The monster of the abyss. Inside the courtyard, Arlong sat on his throne, his serrated saw blade nose gleaming. He looked at Naruto with utter contempt. Child. You think your bloodline makes you special. I am the pinnacle of evolution. Arlong lunged, his jaws capable of crushing stone. Naruto didn't dodge. He caught Arlong's snapping jaws with his bare hands. Evolution. Naruto's voice was a low rumble. You're just a bully hiding in a shallow pond. A massive red tail of energy slammed into the ground, sending a shockwave through the fortress. Naruto's skin began to glow with the orange-red heat of the mythical model, Zenko. You made my navigator cry, Naruto said, his grip tightening until Arlong's teeth began to creak. And for that, I'm going to bury this park at the bottom of the sea. Chapter 10. The Fall of the Fishman Empire. The courtyard of Arlong Park was a scene of absolute devastation. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and salt. Arlong, the self-proclaimed pinnacle of evolution, struggled to pull his jaws free from Naruto's iron grip. You brat, Arlong roared, his eyes bloodshot with rage. You're just a human, a weak, fragile, inferior species. Arlong lunged back, pulling a massive, serrated saw sword called the Kiribaki from his throne. With a guttural scream, he swung the blade down. Naruto didn't draw Ashura. Instead, he gathered a swirling mass of red energy into his right palm. Zenko style. Iron Claw. Naruto caught the serrated blade between his fingers, the red chakra of the fox acting as a shield. The metal groaned and sparked, but it didn't move an inch. The map room of sorrow. The fight crashed through the walls of the main pagoda, spiraling up into the highest tower. They burst into a room filled with thousands of maps, meticulously drawn, stained with ink, and soaked in Nami's old tears. Naruto looked around at the blood-stained pens and the heavy chains bolted to the floor. His heart shattered for the girl who had spent her childhood in this prison. She spent 8 years in this room, Naruto whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying calm. Drawing maps for a monster like you. Arlong laughed, wiping blood from his chin. She's a tool. The best cartographer in the world. She belongs to the Arlong Empire. This room, this empire. Naruto's aura exploded. A second tail of red energy manifested, then a third. The heat was so intense the ink on the maps began to dry and curl. I'm going to erase it all. The maelstrom of judgment. Naruto lunged. His speed was no longer human, he was a streak of crimson fire. He drove his shoulder into Arlong's chest, shattering the fishman's ribs and sending him flying through the stone ceiling. High above Arlong Park, Naruto hovered for a split second, the sun silhouetting his feral form. He held his hand high, and the wind began to scream. A massive, rotating sphere of wind and fire formed, but this wasn't just a Rasengan. It was shaped like a giant shuriken, the air around it vibrating with the frequency of 1,000 blades. Mythical secret. Fox Fire Wind Shuriken. Naruto hurled the attack down. It didn't just hit Arlong, it hit the very foundation of the tower. The spinning blades of wind sliced through the stone, the wood, and the maps of Nami's bondage. Boom! The entire pagoda, the symbol of Arlong's 8-year reign of terror, collapsed into a heap of rubble. Arlong was driven deep into the earth, his kiribaki shattered into 100 pieces. The dawning freedom. Silence fell over Kokoyashi village. The fishmen had been defeated by Sasuke and Sanji, and their king lay broken in the dirt. Nami stood at the gates, the straw hat still firmly on her head. She watched as Naruto walked out of the dust and smoke, his red aura fading and his blue eyes returning to their gentle shine. He held a single piece of paper in his hand, the very first map Nami had ever drawn. "It's over, Nami," Naruto said, his voice soft. "The room is gone. You're free." Nami didn't say anything. She simply ran to him and buried her face in his chest, sobbing, not with the pain of the past, but with the hope of the future. A new legend begins. That evening, the village celebrated like never before. Belle Mare's orange groves were safe, and the tangerine trees seemed to glow in the twilight. As the crew prepared to set sail on the Going Merry, Nami stood at the railing, her old Arlong tattoo replaced by a new one, a tangerine in a windmill. "We're heading for the Grand Line, aren't we?" she asked, her navigator's eyes bright with excitement. "Yeah," Naruto grinned, looking at his crew: Sasuke, the cold avenger; Sanji, the chivalrous cook; Usopp, the brave sniper; and Nami, the genius navigator. "But first, we have one more stop. The city of the beginning and the end. Logatown," Sasuke said, looking at the horizon. "Where the pirate king died. And where my father's shadow still lingers," Naruto thought to himself. As the Going Merry sailed away, the news spread across the East Blue. 2D. Brats, a disgraced Uchiha, a fighting cook, and a master thief had toppled the strongest empires in the sea. The world was watching. Chapter 11. The City of Beginnings and Ends. The sky over Logatown was a bruised purple, heavy with the scent of ozone and salt. This was the city where the great pirate king, Gold Roger, was born and where he met his end on the execution platform. For many, it was a place of pilgrimage. For Naruto, it felt like stepping into a lion's den. "This is it," Nami said, checking her compass. "The last stop before the Grand Line. We need to stock up on supplies, but stay alert. This town is under the command of Captain Smoker." "Smoker?" Usopp gulped. "Is he scary?" "He's a Logia user," Sasuke said, his eyes scanning the rooftops. "He can turn his body into smoke. Physical attacks won't work on him. Even with my Sharingan, you can't hit what isn't solid." Naruto adjusted the strap of Ashura. "Don't worry. We'll be quick. I just want to see the platform where the man who started it all stood." The shadow of the king. While the others went to shop, Naruto wandered toward the central plaza. There, rising like a skeleton against the darkening sky, was the execution platform. Naruto climbed the wooden structure, his boots echoing on the planks. He stood exactly where Roger had stood. He looked out over the crowd, and for a split second, he didn't see the tourists, he felt the weight of an era shifting. "So, you're the one everyone's talking about," a deep, raspy voice boomed. Naruto turned. Standing at the base of the platform was a tall man with silver hair, 2 cigars clamped in his teeth, and a massive jute strapped to his back. His marine coat billowed behind him, the word, "Justice," emblazoned on the back. "Captain Smoker," Naruto said, his hand moving toward his blade. "You look just like him," Smoker said, clouds of thick white smoke drifting from his shoulders. "Not Roger, but the man who humiliated the 5 elders. You're Minato's son, aren't you?" "I'm Naruto," the blonde replied, his eyes narrowing. "And I don't answer for my father's choices. I only answer for my own." White out. Without warning, Smoker's arm transformed into a stream of white vapor, shooting toward the platform like a snake. Naruto leapt back, but the smoke followed, expanding until it filled the entire plaza. White out. Smoker roared. The smoke became as dense as iron, pinning Naruto against the execution post. Naruto felt his strength draining. What is this? Sea stone, Smoker grunted, pulling out his jute. The tip of this weapon is made of the sea itself. For a devil fruit user like you, it's the end of the line. Naruto struggled, the red aura of the Zenko flickering but unable to manifest fully. The sea energy was suffocating his fox spirit. Smoker pinned Naruto to the wooden floor, the jute pressed against his throat. You're Naruto. Your kind always causes trouble. I'm ending your journey before it even begins. The storm of destiny. Just as Smoker raised his weapon for a final blow, the sky turned pitch black. A massive bolt of green lightning struck the center of the plaza, and a gale force wind erupted, so powerful it blew the smoke, and Smoker himself, backward. A figure in a dark green cloak stood between them. The air around him seemed to vibrate with a terrifying, ancient power. The heavens are favoring you today, boy, the hooded man whispered. Smoker struggled to stand against the wind. Why would you help a pirate? Monkey Dragon. The man in the cloak didn't answer. He looked back at Naruto. Under the hood, Naruto caught a glimpse of a face marked with strange, red tribal tattoos. It was a face he had seen in the blurry photographs his father had kept hidden. Go, Naruto, Dragon said, his voice a low rumble. The Grand Line is waiting. The world is waiting for the answer only you can find. The departure. Naruto didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the harbor, meeting up with Sasuke, Sanji, Nami, and Usopp, who were already fighting off a squad of marines led by a swordswoman named Tashigi. The wind is with us. Nami shouted, pointing to the sails of the Going Merry. If we leave now, the storm will carry us up the reverse mountain. They leapt onto the deck just as the rain began to pour in sheets. Behind them, Logatown faded into the mist. Naruto stood at the stern, looking back at the shrouded figure of the man who had saved him. Who was that guy? Usopp panted, clutching his slingshot. I think, Naruto said, looking at the lightning-streaked sky. I think that was the man my dad went to find. Sasuke stood beside him, his gaze fixed on the mountain of water rising in the distance. It doesn't matter. We've survived the East Blue. From here on, the Golden Flash's son, and the Uchiha Avenger, are going into the real hell. Naruto grinned, the orange light returning to his eyes. He raised his fist toward the Grand Line. Bring it on. I'm ready for whatever the sea throws at me. As the Going Merry began its vertical climb up the reverse mountain, the world began to shake. The maelstrom of justice had finally reached the gateway to the world. Chapter 12. The Gate to the Unknown. The Going Merry was no longer sailing, it was flying. The ship surged up the impossible incline of Reverse Mountain, propelled by the colliding currents of the Four Blues. Gravity seemed to lose its meaning as the crew clung to the railings for dear life. If we hit the walls, we're splinters. Nami shrieked over the roar of the water. Usopp, Sanji, keep the rudder steady. Naruto stood at the very front, his blonde hair whipped back by the gale. He looked up at the peak of the mountain, where the water touched the clouds. This is it, the Grand Line. As they crested the summit, the world seemed to go silent for a heartbeat. Then, with a stomach-churning drop, the ship plunged down the other side. They broke through the clouds, and the vast, mysterious expanse of the Grand Line opened up before them. But their celebration was short-lived. A massive, wall-like object blocked the horizon. Is that a mountain? Usopp stammered, his eyes bulging. No, Sasuke said, his Sharingan spinning. It's alive. The island-sized sorrow, a deafening roar, like the sound of 1,000 foghorns, shook the ship. The mountain was an island-sized whale with a scarred forehead, blocking the path into the Grand Line. This was Laboon. It's going to swallow us. Nami cried. Not if I have anything to say about it. Naruto shouted. He channeled the Zenko chakra into his legs and leapt from the deck, landing on the whale's massive snout. Laboon groaned, its giant eye focusing on the small blonde boy. Naruto didn't strike. Instead, he placed his hand on the rough, scarred skin. Through his fruit's primal connection to living spirits, he felt a wave of crushing loneliness and a 50-year-old promise. You're waiting for someone, aren't you? Naruto whispered. Before he could say more, the whale opened its mouth, creating a massive whirlpool that sucked the going merry, and Naruto, into its cavernous stomach. The oasis inside the beast. To their shock, the inside of the whale wasn't a dark pit of acid. It was a giant, painted ocean with a small island in the center, complete with a house and a palm tree. An old man with a flower petal hairstyle sat in a lounge chair, calmly reading a newspaper. Who are you? Sanji demanded, his foot ready to strike. And why are we in a whale's belly? My name is Crocus, the old man said, not looking up. I'm the doctor here, and your lucky Laboon is in a good mood. He's been hitting his head against the red line for half a century, waiting for a crew of pirates who promised to return. Naruto hopped off the whale's inner shore and approached Crocus. He's crying on the inside, old man. I felt it. Who were the pirates? Crocus looked at Naruto, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the Ashura blade on the boy's back. The Rumbar pirates. But they never came back. Laboon refuses to believe they're gone. The vow on the scar. Naruto looked up at the painted sky of the whale's stomach. He's hurting himself for a ghost. That's not a promise, that's a curse. Naruto ran out to the front of the ship. Sasuke, give me a hand. Sasuke sighed but drew his blade, coating it in a thin layer of Chidori lightning. What are you planning, Dobi? We're gonna give him a new reason to wait. Naruto leapt onto Laboon's head once more. Using a kunai, he carved a massive, crude version of his own whirlwind, Jolly Roger right over the whale's scars. Hey, whale, Naruto yelled, punching the whale's skin, which felt like punching a wall. I'm the man who's gonna be the king of these seas. We've started a fight, and I'm not finished yet. Don't you dare die or break that wall until I come back around the world to finish our duel. Laboon paused. The giant whale let out a roar, not of sorrow, but of challenge. The fight gave the whale a new spark of life. The log pose and the secret. As the crew prepared to leave through the massive gates Crocus had installed, the old man handed Nami a strange, glass-domed compass with a needle pointing upward. A log pose, Crocus explained. In the Grand Line, magnetic fields are chaotic. This is the only thing that will lead you from island to island. Follow it, or you'll be lost forever. Crocus watched them sail away into the mist of the Grand Line. He turned back to his house, whispering to the wind. Roger, is that the boy you were waiting for? Or is he the one his father, Minato, sacrificed everything to protect? The will of D is moving faster than ever. On the deck of the Mary, the crew looked ahead. The sea was unpredictable, the sky was changing colors, and they were officially in the graveyard of pirates. So, Sanji said, lighting a cigarette. Where does the needle point first? Nami looked at the log pose. A place called Whiskey Peak. It's supposed to be a town of welcoming people. Naruto grinned, feeling the Zenko spirit humming with excitement. A welcoming party. I love parties. Let's go. But Sasuke stayed at the stern, his Sharingan active. He could see two shadows following them in a small boat, agents of a secret organization known only as Baroque Works. Chapter 13. The Moonlit Trap of Whiskey Peak. The Going Merry drifted into the harbor of Whiskey Peak under a blanket of starlight. To the crew's amazement, the shore wasn't lined with cannons or hostile guards, but with a cheering crowd, music, and the smell of roasting meat. Welcome, heroes of the East Blue, shouted a man with hair shaped like a pair of golden curls. I am Agaram, the mayor of this humble town. Please, come eat, drink, and tell us of your adventures. See, Naruto cheered, already jumping off the ship. I told you they were nice. Food, party. I don't trust this, Sasuke muttered, his hand never leaving the hilt of his blade. It's too perfect. People don't give away free sake in a graveyard for pirates. Relax, Sasuke-kun, Nami said, her eyes turning into berry symbols. Free food means we save our budget for more important things, like my shopping. The Great Feast. The night was a blur of celebration. Naruto entered a ramen eating contest against 10 locals and won by a landslide, his Zenko metabolism burning through calories like a furnace. Sanji was surrounded by adoring women, Usopp was spinning lies about fighting 3 Laboons at once, and even Nami was out drinking the mayor in a contest of endurance. By midnight, the tavern was filled with the snoring sounds of the exhausted crew. Naruto lay face down on a pile of ramen bowls, and Luffy, wait, Naruto, seemed dead to the world. Mayor Agaram's smile vanished. He stood up and signaled to the townspeople. They're out, Agaram whispered. Collect the bounties. The blonde is worth 15 million, the Uchiha 12 million. Lord Crocodile will be pleased with this haul for Baroque works. The townspeople drew their swords and guns. The welcoming committee was actually a hive of 100 bounty hunters. The Hunter and the Avenger. It's a shame, a voice echoed from the rafters. I was actually starting to enjoy the music. Agaram looked up in shock. Sasuke was sitting on a wooden beam, his eyes closed. When he opened them, the red Sharingan glowed with a predatory light in the darkness. You didn't drink the sake. Agaram stammered. I don't drink with people who have shaky hands, Sasuke said, dropping to the floor. At the same time, the pile of ramen bowls exploded. Naruto stood up, wiping his mouth and grinning. And I didn't fall asleep. I was just waiting for the dessert. You were faking. Agaram roared. The Zenko doesn't get drunk, old man, Naruto said, his red aura beginning to shimmer. It just gets hungry for a fight. The dance of 100 blades. The 100 bounty hunters rushed forward. Don't kill them yet. We need them alive for the full bounty. Agaram ordered. Sasuke moved like a shadow. He didn't even draw his sword fully. He used the scabbard to strike pressure points, moving through the crowd with the grace of a panther. Uchiha style. Shadow step. Every time a hunter swung a blade, Sasuke was already behind them, leaving them unconscious before they could scream. Naruto, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of chaos. He didn't use Ashura. He used his bare hands, infused with the wind. Wind style. Gale palm. A burst of compressed air sent 20 hunters flying through the tavern walls and into the street. Naruto leapt out after them, landing in the middle of the moonlit plaza. Suddenly, 4 higher-ranking agents stepped forward. Mr. 5, who could turn his breath into explosions, Miss Valentine, who could change her weight at will, and 2 others who looked strangely familiar. Wait, Naruto said, squinting. You guys were the ones from the whale. It was the 2 agents they had encountered at Reverse Mountain. But before the fight could escalate, a blue-haired girl, Miss Wednesday, stepped forward, her eyes filled with desperation. The princess's secret. Stop, she cried. Agaram, we can't hide it anymore. Baroque Works is already onto us. In a shocking twist, the mayor and the agent dropped their disguises. Agaram was a captain of the Royal Guard, and Miss Wednesday was actually Nefertari Vivi, the princess of the Desert Kingdom, Alabasta. We infiltrated this organization to find out who is destroying our country, Vivi explained, tears in her eyes. But the boss found out. He's one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Sir Crocodile. Naruto crossed his arms, the fox aura settling. A warlord, so he's like Mihawk. Worse, Sasuke said, sensing the weight of the name. He's a man who controls a whole country from the shadows. Naruto looked at Vivi, then at the burning town of Whiskey Peak. He remembered his father's words about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Hey, Vivi, Naruto said, his grin returning. You need a ride to Alabasta. But, you're pirates. Vivi gasped. And Crocodile will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I've already got the world government and the Marines on my back, Naruto laughed, adjusting his hat. What's one more warlord? Beside, I haven't seen a desert yet. Let's go, crew. We've got a princess to save. From the shadows, a mysterious woman with dark hair and a cowboy hat watched them leave. This was Miss All Sunday, Crocodile's partner. She smiled, looking at Naruto's wanted poster. The son of the Flash, and the boy of the Sharingan. This is going to be a very interesting storm. Chapter 14. The Island of Eternal Duels. The Going Merry sailed into a fog so thick it felt like moving through milk. As they emerged, the crew gasped. Towering prehistoric trees reached for the clouds, and the distant roar of creatures that should have been extinct for millions of years shook the deck. This was Little Garden, an island where time had forgotten to move. Dinosaurs. Usopp shrieked, climbing the mast. I can't go on this island, disease. It's fatal. It's fascinating, Nami muttered, clutching her climate baton. The log pose will take an entire year to set here. We're stuck in the Jurassic era. Naruto hopped onto the shore, his eyes wide with excitement. A year? I can't wait that long for ramen. I'm going to find some meat. The clash of giants. Deep in the jungle, Naruto and Sasuke stumbled into a clearing that looked like a crater. Two massive figures, each over 20 meters tall, were locked in a titanic struggle. Their weapons, a giant axe and a massive sword, clashed with such force that the air rippled with shockwaves. 100 years, the one with the long beard roared. And still, you cannot best my blade, Raji. Gahahaha. Your axe has grown dull with age, Dory. The other laughed. Naruto stood between them, looking like an ant. Hey, big guys, watch out. The giants stopped, looking down. Dory, the blue giant, chuckled. Small fry, it's been a long time since we had guests. I am Dory the blue ogre. And I am Raji the red ogre. The other boomed. We are the captains of the giant warrior pirates of Elbaf. Naruto's eyes sparkled. Captains. Elbaf. My Gigi told me about you guys. He said the giants of Elbaf are the proudest warriors in the world. The honor of Elbaf. The giants explained their duel. They had been fighting for 100 years over a hunting dispute, neither willing to back down because of their pride. Naruto sat by their campfire, sharing a giant piece of dinosaur meat. You fight for 100 years, for pride? Sasuke asked, his voice skeptical. Is it worth it, to waste your lives for a grudge? Dory looked at Sasuke, his gaze heavy with wisdom. It is not a grudge, young Uchiha. It is a testament to our spirits. To give up is to die before your heart stops beating. Do you not have a goal that is worth 100 years of struggle? Sasuke looked at his hands, thinking of Itachi. Naruto, however, stood up and slammed his fist into his palm. I get it. It's like me and Sasuke. We fight because we want to see who's stronger, but we're brothers till the end. The wax trap. The peaceful moment was shattered when Dory's barrel of ale exploded in his stomach. He collapsed, coughing up blood. The ale, it was booby-trapped. Raji roared, looking at Naruto and Sasuke with suspicion. Did you do this? No, Naruto yelled. We were right here. From the shadows, a high-pitched laugh echoed. A man wearing a suit with a giant 3 on his head stepped out, accompanied by a girl eating crackers. This was Mr. 3 and Miss Goldenweek of Baroque Works. How flashy, Mr. 3 sneered, his hands glowing with white, liquid wax. I've trapped the giants and the princess. And now, I'll turn you all into beautiful wax statues for my collection. He used his Doru Doru no Mi powers to create a giant wax service set, slowly encasing Nami, Vivi, and Zoro, who had wandered off earlier, in hardening wax. The fox and the candle. You used their honor against them. Naruto's voice was low, vibrating with a terrifying frequency. His red aura flared to life, 3 tails of chakra thrashing behind him. The heat was so intense that the wax nearby began to soften. Wax melts, doesn't it? Naruto growled, his eyes turning slit red. Mr. 3 panicked. Armor. Wax champion. He encased himself in a massive suit of hardened wax, as strong as steel. You can't touch me. My wax is indestructible. Everything melts in the face of a sun. Naruto didn't use a Rasengan. He sprinted forward, his speed so great he left charred footprints on the grass. He leapt into the air, spinning like a top. Zenko's secret art. Fox tail firestorm. His 3 chakra tails ignited into white-hot flames, spinning around him like a saw blade. He slammed into Mr. 3's wax armor. The indestructible wax turned to liquid instantly. Naruto's flaming kick connected with Mr. 3's chest, launching the agent through several prehistoric trees. The giant's gratitude. With Mr. 3 defeated and the wax melted by Naruto's heat, the crew was saved. Raji realized the truth and apologized to the boys. Though injured, the two giants stood side by side. You have the spirit of Elbaf, Naruto, Dory said, leaning on his sword. But your path to Alabasta is blocked by the Island Eater, a goldfish so large it swallows entire ships. Don't worry, Raji grinned. As thanks for saving our honor, we will carve a path for you. As the Going Merry sailed toward the exit of the island, a mountain-sized goldfish rose from the depths, its mouth wide enough to swallow the horizon. Dory and Raji stood on the shore, raising their weapons together. Hakoku Sovereignty. A massive blast of pure warrior energy tore through the air, piercing the giant fish and creating a tunnel of light for the ship to pass through. Goodbye, giants, Naruto yelled, waving from the deck. I'll see you in Elbaf. But as they sailed away, Nami collapsed on the deck, her forehead burning with a fever. Naruto, I don't feel so good. Vivi caught her. It's a prehistoric virus. We need a doctor, now. Naruto looked at the empty horizon. A doctor? Where do we find a doctor in the middle of the sea? The log poses pointing to a winter island, Vivi said urgently. Drum Island. Chapter 15. The Winter Blossom. The heat of Little Garden was a distant memory as the Going Merry sailed into a wall of white. Snow began to fall in heavy, silent flakes, and the temperature plummeted until the deck was coated in ice. In the infirmary, Nami's condition had worsened, her skin was pale, and her breath was shallow. She's burning up, but her body is freezing, Vivi said, her voice trembling. If we don't find a doctor in the next few hours. Naruto slammed his fist against the cabin wall. I won't let her die. Sanji, how far to the next island? There. Sanji shouted, pointing through the blizzard. Rising out of the frozen sea were the Drum Rockies, massive, pillar-like mountains that looked like giant drums. This was Drum Island, a land once famous for its medical brilliance, now a desolate, frozen wasteland. The king's cruelty. As they docked, they were met not with open arms, but with the barrels of rifles. The villagers, led by a man named Dalton, were wary of pirates. We have no doctors here. Dalton shouted. Our king, Wapol, took them all for himself. Only one remains, the witch, who lives at the top of the highest peak. Then that's where I'm going, Naruto said, stepping onto the snow. He looked at Nami, who was wrapped in heavy blankets. I'll carry her. Naruto strapped Nami to his back with a sturdy rope. Sanji joined him, but Sasuke stayed behind to guard the ship and Vivi. Go, Sasuke said, his breath hitching in the cold. If anyone tries to cross this line, they'll have to deal with me. The climb of faith. The journey up the mountain was a nightmare. The wind howled like a wounded beast, and the Lapons, giant, carnivorous snow rabbits, attacked in swarms. Naruto didn't use his sword, he couldn't risk the shockwaves hurting Nami. He used his body as a shield, taking hits from the rabbits and the falling rocks. When an avalanche struck, Sanji was buried, and Naruto's legs were nearly crushed. But he kept going. He climbed the vertical face of the drum rock with his bare fingers, his blood freezing on the stone. Just stay warm. Naruto whispered to Nami, his Zenko aura flickering weakly. He was using every bit of his chakra not to fight, but to radiate heat into Nami's body. By the time he reached the summit, Naruto's fingernails were gone, and his knees were raw. He collapsed at the gates of the giant castle, seeing a strange silhouette through the blur of the snow, a creature with a blue nose and antlers. Please, Naruto croaked. Save my friend. The doctor with a blue nose. When Naruto woke up, he was covered in bandages. He looked over and saw Nami resting peacefully in a warm bed. Standing by the window was a small, bipedal reindeer wearing a pink hat with a white cross. A monster. Naruto yelled, pointing. I'm not a monster. The reindeer shrieked, hiding behind a wall, but in the wrong direction, so his whole body was visible. I'm a doctor. My name is Tony Chopper. Chopper had eaten the Hito Hito no Mi, human fruit, giving him human intelligence and the ability to speak. He was the apprentice of Dr. Kurha, a 139-year-old woman who looked like she could still kick a hole through a mountain. The girl will live, Kurha said, sipping a bottle of plum wine. But you, boy, your spirit is strange. There's a fox sleeping inside you that almost burned my castle down while you were unconscious. The return of the Tin King. The peace was broken by the sound of cannons. Wapol, the former king who had fled when Blackbeard attacked the island, had returned. He had the Baku Baku no Mi, munch fruit, allowing him to eat anything and turn his body into it. This is my castle. Wapol roared from his snow stepper. Kill the witch and the reindeer. And bring me that blonde brat's sword. Chopper stepped forward, his fur bristling. I won't let you hurt this flag. He pointed to a black flag with a skull and cherry blossoms, the legacy of his mentor, Dr. Hirolik. Naruto stood up, his bones cracking. He walked past Chopper and stood in front of Wapol. Chopper, you're a doctor, right? Doctors heal people. Naruto drew Ashura, the blade humming with a dark, hungry energy. I'm a pirate, Naruto growled, his eyes turning slit red. And pirates, we take out the trash. Naruto lunged. Wapol tried to eat him, opening his mouth wide, but Naruto was too fast. He channeled the Zenko power into a single, focused point. Uzumaki's secret art. Crimson drill. He spun through the air like a tornado, his sword hitting Wapol's iron-hard stomach. The rotation was so powerful it bypassed Wapol's armor, launching the Tin King miles away, straight into the ocean. The miracle of the snow. As the crew prepared to leave, Naruto looked at Chopper. The reindeer was crying, feeling like he didn't belong anywhere because he was a monster. Shut up, Naruto yelled, grinning. Just come with us. We've already got a fox, an avenger, and a talking sword. We need a doctor who can kick ass. Chopper wiped his eyes and let out a joyous howl. As the Going Merry sailed away, Dr. Kurha fired Hiroluk's final invention into the sky. The chemicals reacted with the snow, turning the white flakes into a brilliant, glowing pink. The mountains looked like giant cherry blossom trees in full bloom. It's a miracle, Nami whispered, standing on the deck, fully healed. Naruto looked at his new nakama, Chopper, and then toward the south. Alabasta is next. Vivi, we're almost home. Chapter 16. The Son of the Desert. The biting frost of Drum Island was quickly replaced by a heat so intense it felt like standing in an oven. The Going Merry arrived at the port city of Nanohana, where the air shimmered with heat haze and the scent of exotic spices. Water. I need water. Usopp groaned, draped over the railing like a wet rag. We're here, Vivi said, her voice heavy with emotion as she looked at the sandstone buildings of her homeland. But look at the harbor. It's dry. The rain hasn't fallen here in 3 years. Naruto hopped onto the pier, his Zenko fruit reacting to the heat. He felt energized, the fire within him resonating with the desert sun. All right, first things first. Food. I heard Alabasta has the best spicy meat in the world. The encounter at the Spice Bean. Naruto sprinted toward a local restaurant called the Spice Bean. He burst through the doors, but stopped dead. A man was slumped over a plate of food, apparently dead. Ah, someone call Chopper. Naruto screamed. Suddenly, the man sat up, a piece of meat still stuck to his cheek. He blinked at Naruto. He wore a signature orange hat with 2 smiley faces and a string of red beads. On his back was a tattoo that made Naruto's heart skip a beat, the Whitebeard Pirate's Jolly Roger. Ace! Naruto yelled. The man turned around, a wide, cocky grin breaking across his face. Naruto, I heard you'd set sail, but I didn't think I'd find you in a place like this. Portgas D. Ace, Naruto's older brother, stood up and crushed Naruto in a massive bear hug. Look at you. You've grown, but you still smell like wet fur. And you still fall asleep while eating. Naruto laughed. The hunter and the flame. The reunion was interrupted when the wall of the restaurant exploded. A man stepped through the dust, his marine coat billowing. It was Smoker, who had pursued Naruto all the way from Logatown. Found you, Uzumaki, Smoker growled, his arms already turning into white plumes of smoke. Not today, Smoker. Ace stepped in front of Naruto, his skin beginning to crackle with orange embers. You're dealing with the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates now. Mara Mara no mi. The flame fruit, Smoker muttered, bracing himself. The two elements clashed, white smoke against golden fire. The resulting explosion created a pillar of heat that could be seen for miles. Go, Naruto, Ace shouted over his shoulder. I'll hold him off. Meet me at the outskirts of the city. The shadow of the warlord. The crew gathered at the edge of Nanohana, where Ace officially introduced himself to the rest of the crew. So you're Naruto's brother? Sanji asked, lighting a cigarette. You seem much more polite than him. I did my best to raise him, Ace joked, then his face turned serious. Naruto, I'm here because I'm hunting a man named Blackbeard. He was part of my crew, but he committed the ultimate sin, he killed a comrade and fled. I heard he might be heading toward Alabasta. We're here to take down Crocodile, Naruto said, his eyes turning toward the vast dunes of the desert. He's trying to steal Vivi's kingdom. Ace looked at his younger brother and saw the conviction in his eyes. He reached into his pocket and handed Naruto a small, charred piece of paper. This is a Vivre card, Ace explained. It's a piece of my soul. No matter where we are in the world, this paper will point toward me. Keep it safe. We'll meet again in the new world, Naruto. The trek into the sands. Ace departed in a flurry of flames, leaving the crew to face the daunting task of crossing the Alabasta Desert to reach the rebel base in Yuba. The desert was a brutal teacher. They faced giant, Sandora lizards, deceptive, Warunagi, birds that stole their supplies, and the soul-crushing heat. But Naruto led the way, his red aura acting as a beacon through the sandstorms. We have to stop the rebellion, Vivi pleaded, looking at the parched earth. Crocodile is using dance powder to steal the rain from the rest of the country and make it fall only on the capital. He wants the people to blame my father, the king. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He looked at the horizon, where a massive sandstorm was brewing, a storm that wasn't natural. He's not just stealing rain, Vivi, Naruto growled, his Zenko senses picking up a dark, sandy presence in the wind. He's stealing the heart of this country. Sasuke, you feel that? Sasuke nodded, his Sharingan active. There's a massive power coming this way. It's dry, and it tastes like salt. From the top of a distant dune, a man appeared, his silhouette tall and imposing. He wore a long fur coat despite the heat, and his left hand was a golden hook. Sir Crocodile had arrived. So, the warlord's voice echoed through the desert, the little princess brought some stray dogs to play in my sandbox. Chapter 17. The Sand Tomb. The desert wind howled, but it wasn't a cool breeze, it was a rasping, dry gale that sucked the moisture from their lungs. Sir Crocodile stood atop the dune, looking down at the crew with the bored eyes of a god watching ants. Vivi, Crocodile said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. You've led these children on a very long walk just to watch them die in the sand. How cruel of a princess. Shut up. Naruto stepped forward, the heat of the sand melting the soles of his boots. I've met guys like you before. You think because you have a fancy title, you own the world. Crocodile chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. He blew a cloud of cigar smoke into the air. Title? No. I own this land because I am this land. I give you 3 minutes. That is all the time a rookie like you deserves. The mirage of invincibility. Naruto didn't wait. He lunged forward, his speed creating a sonic boom that kicked up a wall of sand. He unsheathed Ashura, the black blade glowing with a faint, angry red light. Uzumaki style. Rising Fox. Naruto swung the blade in a vertical arc, aiming to split the warlord in two. The blade passed through Crocodile's waist with no resistance. Naruto's eyes widened. He hadn't hit flesh, he had hit sand. Crocodile's upper body drifted apart into millions of grains, only to reform behind Naruto. Logia, boy, you cannot cut the desert. Crocodile raised his golden hook. Desert Spada. He slammed his hand into the ground, and a blade of pressurized sand shot through the dunes, splitting the earth for hundreds of yards. Naruto barely flipped out of the way, the shockwave grazing his shoulder and drawing blood. The drying hand. Sasuke moved to intervene, his Chidori crackling in his hand. Naruto, move. Electricity might. No. Naruto yelled, his red aura flaring to its third tail. Stay back. He's mine to finish. Naruto knew his sword was useless if he couldn't touch the man. He dropped the blade and charged with his bare hands. He threw a barrage of punches, each one infused with the Zenko's fire. Zenko Gatling. The heat was intense, but Crocodile simply laughed. He caught Naruto's fist with his right hand, his human hand. Do you know what happens to things that stay too long in the sun, Uzumaki? Crocodile asked. Suddenly, Naruto felt the moisture being sucked out of his body. His skin began to shrivel, his eyes grew dim, and his strength vanished. Crocodile's Suna no Mi allowed him to dehydrate anything he touched. You're a monster, Naruto gasped, his throat turning to dust. I am a warlord, Crocodile replied. He lifted Naruto by the throat and tossed him into a massive pit of sinking sand he had created. Desert Girasole. The sinking hope. Naruto fell into the swirling vortex of sand, his body too weak to fight back. As he was pulled under, he saw the horrified faces of Nami, Vivi, and Chopper. Naruto. Vivi screamed, reaching out. Crocodile turned his back on the pit. He's gone. In 3 minutes, he'll be a mummy at the bottom of the basin. Now, let's discuss the fate of your kingdom, princess. Just as the sand was about to cover Naruto's face, a single drop of liquid fell from his belt. It was the water bottle Vivi had given him earlier. It had cracked during the fight. As the water touched his parched skin, Naruto's eyes snapped open. Water. He remembered how the sand stuck to his sweaty palms earlier. He remembered the blood on his shoulder that didn't turn to sand when Crocodile's attack hit it. If I can't cut the sand, I'll make it solid. The first defeat. But the realization came too late. The weight of the desert was too heavy, and Naruto's body was too dehydrated. He was buried deep beneath the dunes. Crocodile walked away, leaving the rest of the crew to be surrounded by Baroque Works agents. For the first time since setting sail, the whirlwind had been silenced. Deep underground, in the darkness, a small red glow began to pulse. The Zenko spirit wasn't dead. It was waiting, and somewhere in the distance, a mysterious figure in a white cowboy hat, Nico Robin, watched the spot where Naruto disappeared, a strange smile on her face. So, the light of the flickers, she whispered. Let's see if the rain can bring it back to life. Chapter 18. The Rain Din. The desert was a cruel grave. Above ground, Crocodile had already departed for Rainbase, his casino city, leaving his high-ranking agents to round up the trash. Vivi, Nami, and the others were captured, bound in seastone-lined chains that drained the strength of even the most spirited warrior. But beneath the shifting sands, Naruto was not dead. The water from his broken canteen had acted like a spark in a dry forest. His cells, screaming for moisture, absorbed the liquid, and the Zenko within him roared in response. The red chakra didn't just heat up, it boiled. Boom. The desert floor erupted. A pillar of sand shot into the sky, and Naruto emerged, his skin glowing a fierce orange red. He was breathing heavily, his throat still raw, but his eyes were fixed on the distant silhouette of Rainbase's pyramid-shaped casino, Rain Din. You're not getting away. Naruto growled, his voice a low, bestial rasp. The gilded cage. Inside the Rain Din, the situation was dire. Vivi and the crew, including Sasuke, who had been caught in a specialized trap, were locked in a massive cage made of pure seastone. Crocodile sat on a velvet throne outside the bars, swirling a glass of wine. You see, princess, even your miracle workers have limits. Now, in 10 minutes, the basement will flood with seawater, and my Bananawani giant crocodiles with bananas on their heads, will have a very expensive feast. You monster! Vivi screamed, clutching the bars. I am a businessman, Crocodile countered. And business is about eliminating competition. The uninvited guest. Suddenly, the front doors of the casino didn't just open, they were blasted off their hinges. A blur of gold and red tore through the gilded lobby. The Baroque Works guards were sent flying like bowling pins. Naruto stood at the entrance of the basement chamber. He was covered in sand, his clothes torn, and he was carrying a massive barrel of water on his shoulder. Naruto! Chopper cheered, tears streaming down his blue nose. Crocodile stood up, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. You survived the girasole. Impossible. I told you, Naruto said, slamming the barrel down and drenching his own arms and chest until he was soaking wet. I'm the man who's going to be king. And a king doesn't die in a sandbox. The secret of the sand. Naruto lunged. Crocodile scoffed and turned his arm into a sand blade. Desert Spada. But this time, when Naruto swung his fist, he didn't pass through. His wet knuckles connected squarely with Crocodile's jaw. Crack. The warlord was sent skidding across the marble floor, his lip bleeding. The room went silent. The agents, the crew, even Robin gasped. Sand turns to mud when it's wet, Naruto panted, a wild grin on his face. I can touch you now, Crocodile. You little brat. Crocodile's cool composure shattered. His face twisted into a mask of pure malice. So you figured out my weakness. It won't save you. I'm still a master of the desert. The chaos of Rainbase. As the two clashed, the casino began to rumble. Sasuke, seeing his opening, used his remaining strength to channel a pinpoint Chidori into the lock of the seastone cage. It wasn't enough to break the bars, but it fried the electronic mechanism. Usopp. The key. Sasuke shouted. Outside the cage, a mysterious small ball of paper rolled toward them. It was from Mr. 3, who had been demoted and fed to a Bananawani, but survived. In a desperate bid for mercy, he had crafted a wax key. I'll handle the lizards, Sanji yelled, bursting out of the cage as the lock clicked. Naruto, finish that overgrown lizard. The desert's wrath. The fight moved from the basement to the streets of Rainbase. Crocodile was no longer holding back. He used his powers to erode the very buildings around them, turning the city into a swirling vortex of dust. Sables. A massive tornado of sand lifted Naruto into the air. But Naruto was prepared. He bit his thumb, smearing blood on his palm, the same technique Garp had taught him for summoning his inner strength. Zenko art. Great Fox pressure. Naruto released a massive burst of wind from his palms, counter-rotating the tornado until it collapsed. He landed on a rooftop, looking down at Crocodile. This ends in the capital, Alubarna, Naruto declared. I'm going to stop the rebellion, and I'm going to take your hook and bury it in the sand. Crocodile vanished into a cloud of dust, his voice echoing in the wind. Then come to Alubarna, boy. I'll be waiting at the royal palace. Let's see if you can save a kingdom that's already dead. Naruto turned to his crew, who had finally regrouped. Vivi, get to the palace. Stop the armies. We'll handle the agents. The final battle for Alabasta had begun. Chapter 19. The Alubarna Bloodbath. The sun hung over the capital city of Alubarna like a vengeful eye. Below, the dust of a million marching feet rose from the plains. The rebel army, led by Vivi's childhood friend Koza, was charging toward the royal palace, fueled by the lies and dance powder deceptions of Baroque works. We have to stop them before the first drop of blood is spilled. Vivi cried, riding her loyal duck, Kuru, toward the front lines. Go, Vivi, Naruto shouted, his eyes scanning the horizon. We'll clear the path. The crew split up, each facing one of the specialized officer agents who stood between them and the peace of Alabasta. The duel of the steel and the flame. In the western district, Sasuke stood alone against Mr. 1, a man whose body was made entirely of blades thanks to the Supa no Mi. You're a swordsman, Mr. 1 said, his arms turning into rotating saws. That makes you my natural prey. No blade can cut a man made of steel. Sasuke didn't speak. He drew the remains of his blade, his Sharingan spinning with 3 tomo. The air around him crackled with blue electricity. I don't need to cut steel, Sasuke whispered. I just need to find the frequency that shatters it. The clash was a symphony of sparks. Sasuke moved with a speed that blurred the senses, his Chidori singing like 1,000 birds. For every slash Mr. One landed, Sasuke countered with a pinpoint strike to the joints. With a final, roaring thrust, Sasuke drove his lightning-clad hand through Mr. One's chest plate. Uchiha style, piercing heaven. The steel man fell, his unbreakable body yielding to the lightning of the Avenger. The knight and the ballerina. In the central plaza, Sanji was locked in a bizarre dance with Mr. Tu Bankure. Toi. Mr. Tu shouted, spinning in his swan-themed ballet outfit. His kicks were as powerful as cannonballs. My Okama Kenpo is the most flamboyant art in the world. Sanji wiped blood from his chin, his eyes flashing. Your kicks are good, but you lack the passion of a man who cooks for his friends. Sanji's leg began to glow, the friction of his spinning foot creating a localized heat that rivaled the desert sun. Concasse. Their legs collided in a shockwave that shattered the surrounding pavement. In the end, it was Sanji's chivalry and burning spirit that sent the ballerina flying. Despite their fight, a strange respect formed between the two, a bond of warriors that would change the future. The sniper's courage and the navigator's wit. Usopp and Chopper faced the duo of Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas. Between a 4-ton bat and a woman who could turn into a mole, the two cowards of the crew were pushed to their limits. I can't do it. I'm just a liar, Usopp wailed, even as his skull cracked from a hit. But then he saw Naruto's flag waving in the distance. He remembered the promise he made at the Giants' duel. A man can't run away when his friend's dream is being laughed at. With a brilliant combination of Chopper's rumble ball transformations and Usopp's ingenious Usopp hammer, which was actually just a balloon, followed by a real lead pipe, they took down the underground duo in a messy, heroic victory. The final ascent. Meanwhile, Nami used her new Kleem attack, a staff built by Usopp, to manipulate the desert air. She created a localized thunderstorm, striking down Miss Doublefinger with a bolt of artificial lightning. The stage is set, Nami panted, looking up at the royal palace. At the very top, on the palace roof, the sound of the rebellion was drowned out by the clash of gold and steel. Naruto stood before Crocodile once more. The warlord was no longer smiling. His fur coat was gone, and his golden hook was stained with blood. The clock is ticking, brat, Crocodile hissed, pointing to the giant clock tower in the plaza. In 5 minutes, a massive cannonball will fire into the center of the crowd. Rebels, royals, everyone will be vaporized. And I will be the king of the ashes. Naruto's red aura exploded, reaching a 4th tail. His skin began to darken, the fox's power beginning to take a more physical, terrifying shape. You're not going to be king of anything, Naruto growled, the earth beneath him melting. Because I'm going to knock you into the bedrock. The final round had begun. Chapter 20. The Will of the Abyss. The air atop the Alubarna Plateau was heavy with the smell of gunpowder and the screams of the millions below. The clock tower loomed over the city like a guillotine. 5 minutes, Uzumaki, Crocodile sneered, his body dissolving into a localized sandstorm. 5 minutes until your friends and this entire kingdom become a memory. Naruto didn't respond with words. His body was hunched, his skin a deep, bruised crimson as the Zenko's 4th tail manifested. He wasn't just a boy anymore, he was a miniature disaster. The moisture in the air sizzled against his skin, and the blood from his wounds acted as the perfect conductor to strike the Logia user. The blood-soaked fist. Crocodile lunged, his hook glowing with a lethal sheen. Desert Girasole. The roof of the palace turned into a liquid vortex of sand, threatening to swallow Naruto whole. But Naruto slammed his fist into the ground. A shockwave of red chakra countered the vibration, stabilizing the stone. I don't need a barrel of water anymore, Naruto growled, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. He held up his hands, which were dripping with his own blood. As long as I'm bleeding, I can hit you. Naruto vanished. He reappeared beneath Crocodile's guard, delivering an uppercut that sent the warlord soaring into the sky. Naruto followed, leaping from falling debris. The clock tower crisis. Below, the rest of the crew had reached the base of the clock tower. Vivi was screaming for the soldiers to stop, but the roar of battle was too loud. We have to get to the top and stop that cannon. Vivi cried. Leave it to us, Sanji shouted, launching Usopp into the air with a power kick receive. Usopp soared through the sky, clutching a specialized star. As he reached the clock face, he saw the massive barrel emerging. It's too big to dismantle. Chopper. Sasuke. Give me everything. Sasuke, standing at the base, channeled a massive Chidori into the tower's iron supports, weakening the structure, while Chopper in heavy point braced the foundation. With a final, desperate shot, Usopp fired an impact dial he had scavenged, redirecting the cannon's initial blast upward into the clouds. The explosion rocked the city, but the plaza remained intact. The final storm. Uzumaki rend. Back in the sky, Crocodile was losing his composure. I am a warlord of the sea. I am the desert itself. You are nothing but a brat with a curse. He condensed the entire atmosphere's moisture into a single point on his hook. Sables. Pesado. Naruto didn't dodge. He pulled his right arm back, the red chakra spinning into a massive, jagged sphere that looked like a miniature sun. It wasn't just a Rasengan, it was the manifestation of every promise he had made since leaving Dawn Island. Zenko's secret art. Maelstrom of the Abyss. The two powers collided in midair. The shockwave blew the clouds away for miles. Naruto's blood-soaked fist drove the sphere straight through Crocodile's sand armor and into his chest. This is for Vivi. This is for Alabasta. With a final roar, Naruto hammered Crocodile downward. The warlord crashed through the roof of the royal tomb, through layers of bedrock, and finally landed in the middle of the plaza, unconscious and broken, in front of the very people he had tried to destroy. The reign of redemption. As Crocodile fell, the sky finally broke. A single drop of water hit Vivi's cheek. Then another. Within seconds, a torrential downpour, the first in 3 years, washed over the blood and dust of Alubarna. The soldiers and rebels stopped, dropping their weapons as they looked up at the miracle. The rain, Vivi whispered, falling to her knees. It's back. Naruto tumbled from the sky, his fourth tail receding, his body exhausted. He landed softly in the mud, looking up at the gray clouds. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sasuke, looking tired but offering a rare, genuine smirk. You did it, Dobi. We did it, Naruto corrected, closing his eyes as the rain washed the red aura away. The farewell. Days later, the crew stood at the coast. The Marines, led by a frustrated smoker, who had been ordered to take credit for the victory, were searching for them. Vivi stood on the shore, her royal robes restored. I want to go with you, she said, her voice trembling. But I love my country. I can't leave them now. Naruto grinned, even though his heart was heavy. He turned his back to her, and the rest of the crew followed suit. They didn't say a word, knowing the Marines were watching. Instead, they all raised their left arms high into the air. Wrapped around each wrist was a white bandage, the X mark of their brotherhood. Vivi raised her arm in return, tears streaming down her face. Even if they were miles apart, they would always be nakama. As the Going Merry sailed into the sunset, a shadow moved in the captain's cabin. Naruto walked in to find a woman in a white cowboy hat sitting on his bed, reading a book. Nico Robin, Naruto shouted, his hand flying to his sword. I have nowhere else to go, she said calmly, looking at him with mysterious eyes. And you're the first I've met who smiles when he fights. Will you let me join your dream? Naruto paused, then laughed, sheathing his blade. Sure, but you have to help us find the next island. Chapter 21. The Mystery of the Sky Island. After saving Alabasta, the Going Merry had a new, enigmatic crew member, Nico Robin. While Sasuke remained suspicious, keeping his hand close to his blade, Naruto's instincts told him that Robin wasn't a threat. She was just a woman searching for a place to belong. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a massive, centuries-old galleon fell from the clouds, nearly crushing their ship. To Nami's horror, the needle of her log pose, the compass that never lies, was pointing straight up into the air. An island in the sky? That's scientifically impossible, Nami shrieked, clutching the railing. If the needle is pointing up, then the path is up, Sasuke said calmly, though even his Sharingan couldn't see past the thick veil of the upper atmosphere. Jaya and the Man of Dreams. In search of a way to reach the heavens, the crew docked at Jaya, a lawless island filled with cutthroats. There, Naruto entered a tavern and found himself sitting next to a massive man with a messy beard eating cherry pies. The era of dreaming pirates is over. A local bully, Bellamy, mocked from across the bar. But the man next to Naruto stood up, his presence heavy and dark. People's dreams don't ever end, he roared, laughing with a wild, toothy grin. Naruto felt a chill. His Zenko spirit growled deep within him. This man was Marshal D. Teach Blackbeard. He carried an aura of absolute darkness, a void that seemed ready to swallow the world. For a moment, their eyes met, the light of the fox and the shadow of the dark. See you at the top, brat, Teach chuckled as he walked out. The knock upstream. With the help of a man named Cricket, a descendant of the legendary liar, Norland, the crew modified the Going Merry with wings and a reinforced hull. They sailed to a specific coordinate in the sea where the knock upstream, a colossal vertical geyser, was predicted to erupt. Hold on to your souls, Naruto yelled, anchoring himself to the mast. He channeled the Zenko chakra, creating translucent red tails that wrapped around the ship like safety harnesses. The ocean floor groaned. Then, with a deafening explosion, the sea split open. A massive pillar of water shot into the sky, carrying the Going Merry vertically at incredible speeds. Sasuke used his Chidori to deflect falling boulders, while Sanji and Chopper secured the supplies. As they pierced through the cumulonimbus clouds, the pressure vanished. They opened their eyes to find themselves floating on a sea of white, fluffy clouds. This is Skypia, Robin whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. The false god. The serenity was shattered by a bolt of blue lightning that struck a nearby cloud. A voice, cold and arrogant, echoed through the sky, vibrating in their very bones. Welcome to my garden, insects. You have entered the domain of the Almighty. I am Enel, the god of this world. Naruto looked up. Sitting on a throne of gold atop a floating structure was a man with long earlobes and drums attached to his back. Sparks of 200 million volts danced around his fingers. Naruto cracked his knuckles, a confident grin spreading across his face. A god? Huh, I've beaten kings and warlords, but I haven't punched a god yet. Sasuke, you ready? Sasuke drew his blade, blue electricity crackling along the steel to match the god's lightning. Don't get in my way, Naruto. This god looks like he's made of the same stuff as my Chidori. Chapter 22. The Sound of the Golden Bell. The air in Skypia was thin and crackled with static. The crew stood on the upper yard, a forbidden land of soil and giant beanstalks. Before them, God Enel sat cross-legged, biting into an apple with agonizing nonchalance. You speak of beating a god, Enel said, his voice shimmering with electricity. But you cannot even touch the lightning. With a flick of his finger, a bolt of 30 million volts descended. Sasuke reacted instantly, his Sharingan tracking the discharge. He swung his blade, his own Chidori acting as a lightning rod to ground the strike. He's fast, Sasuke muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. But his movements, it's like he knows what I'm going to do before I do it. That is mantra, Enel laughed. I hear your every thought. I feel the spark of your very souls. The paradox of the fox. Naruto lunged forward, his red aura flaring. He swung a fist infused with the Zenko's heat, but Enel simply turned into a blur of light. The punch passed through him, hitting nothing but air. You're a Logia user, just like Crocodile. Naruto yelled. But I don't have any water here. Water would not save you from 200 million volts, boy, Enel countered. He struck Naruto in the chest with his golden staff. L4. A pillar of pure white lightning consumed Naruto. The crew screamed, but when the smoke cleared, Naruto was standing, charred and smoking, but grinning. My Zenko fruit, it's made of the sun's fire and the earth's spirit, Naruto panted. Lightning is just energy. And I'm a battery that never runs out. The duel of the heavens. Sasuke realized that while they couldn't cut lightning, they could disrupt the frequency. Naruto. Keep him distracted. I'm going to overload his mantra. Sasuke closed his eyes, focusing all his chakra into his Sharingan. He began to move in a chaotic, unpredictable pattern, the Uzumaki barrage style he had learned from watching Naruto. By moving without thinking, he bypassed Enel's ability to predict the future. What is this? Enel snarled, his calm mask slipping. Sasuke's blade grazed Enel's shoulder, the friction of the Chidori clashing with the Guro no Mi. Meanwhile, Naruto gathered a massive amount of wind in his palm. He knew he couldn't hit the lightning, but he could compress the air around it. Wind style. Pressure vacuum. The wind sucked the oxygen away, momentarily snuffing out Enel's electrical form. The Golden Bell's song. Enough. Enel roared. He transformed into a massive thunder god of pure energy. 200 million volts. Amaru. The entire upper yard began to melt. But Naruto saw his target, the legendary Golden Bell of Shandora, hidden within the giant beanstalk. It was the symbol of the promise made between the ancestors of the sky and the earth. I promised the old man in Jaya that the bell would ring again. Naruto's aura reached its peak. A golden red fox silhouette loomed behind him, its 9 tails reaching for the sky. He fused his Rasengan with the pure golden energy of the bell's platform. Zenko art. Golden maelstrom. Naruto lunged through the lightning, his red chakra acting as a protective shell. He slammed his fist not into Enel, but into the golden bell. The sheer vibration of the massive bell acted as a sonic boom, shattering Enel's electrical frequency and sending the god crashing out of the sky and into the endless white clouds below. Dong, dong, dong. The sound echoed down through the clouds, all the way to the blue sea below. On the island of Jaya, the old man cricket looked up and wept. The liar's debt was finally paid. The fall from grace. As the crew gathered the gold and prepared to leave, Robin stood before the poneglyph hidden in the bell's base. She read the words left behind by Gold Roger himself. I was here, and I will lead these words to the end of the world. The end of the world, Robin whispered. Is that where we're going, Naruto? We're going wherever the wind takes us. Naruto cheered, though his eyes drifted to the horizon. His Vivre card, the one Ace gave him, began to smolder and move frantically. Sasuke, something's wrong, Naruto said, his smile fading. The paper, it's burning. The Grand Line was calling them back down. A storm was brewing at the center of the world, and this time, even a God's power wouldn't be enough to stop it. Chapter 23. The Devil's Judiciary. The descent from the sky was a chaotic plummet. The Going Merry landed in the blue sea with a bone-shaking splash, but the victory in Skypia felt hollow. The Vivre card in Naruto's hat was charred at the edges, twitching toward the horizon like a dying heartbeat. Something is happening to Ace, Naruto muttered, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a cold dread. We have bigger problems, Sasuke interrupted, his Sharingan fixed on the horizon. We're being followed. Before they could react, they were intercepted at a long, jagged island. But it wasn't a pirate or a marine that stopped them, it was a woman with a shadow in her eyes. Nico Robin had disappeared into the night, leaving only a note, farewell. If I stay, you will all die. The CP9 and the Train of Shadows. The crew tracked her to Water 7, the city of shipwrights. There, they discovered the terrifying truth. Robin had surrendered herself to CP9, the world government's secret assassination squad. They were taking her to Eni's lobby, the judicial island from which no prisoner ever returns. They have the power of Rokushiki, Sanji reported, his suit torn after a brief clash with a man who could turn his body into iron. They move like shadows and hit like falling mountains. I don't care if they're ghosts, Naruto growled, the red aura of the Zenko bubbling under his skin. She's our navigator's friend. She's our nakama. We're going to the heart of the government to get her back. The gates of Eni's lobby. The crew boarded the Puffing Tom, a sea train that cut through a massive storm. When they reached Eni's lobby, they were met by 10,000 Marines and the elite CP9 agents. The crew stood on the roof of the courthouse, facing the Tower of Law. Robin stood on the balcony across from them, her hands in seastone cuffs. Why did you come for me? Robin screamed, her voice cracking. I want to die. The world says my very existence is a sin. If I stay with you, the entire world will hunt you down. Naruto looked at the world government flag flying high above the tower, the symbol of absolute authority over 170 nations. Sasuke, Naruto said quietly. On it, Sasuke replied. He didn't use a sword. He gathered a concentrated ball of black fire, the Amaterasu, and launched it at the flag. Within seconds, the symbol of the world government was nothing but ash. You just declared war on the entire world. The CP9 leader, Rob Lucci, roared. That's fine by me, Naruto yelled back. Robin, I haven't heard it from you yet. Tell me you want to live. Robin collapsed to her knees, her tears soaking the stone. For the first time in 20 years, she let out a scream that shook the island. I want to live. Take me to the sea with you. The leopard and the fox. The bridge lowered, and the final war began. Each member of the crew took on a CP9 agent, but Naruto was intercepted by Rob Lucci, who had the Neko no Mi model leopard. Lucci was a killing machine. His Rokuogan shockwaves bypassed Naruto's chakra cloak, damaging his internal organs. You rely on your beast, Lucci hissed, his leopard claws dripping with Naruto's blood. But I have mastered the human body. You are nothing but a wild animal. Naruto struggled to stand, his vision blurring. But then, he felt a familiar pulse. The Zenko wasn't just a beast, it was a partner. Naruto closed his eyes and synchronized his breathing with the fox. Zenko style. Sage of the Whirlwind. Naruto's aura turned from a violent red to a calm, shimmering gold. His speed surpassed Lucci's, Soru. He delivered a barrage of punches that hit with the weight of a mountain. Uzumaki 2-kilo barrage. Lucci fired his ultimate shockwave, but Naruto drove through it, slamming a golden Rasengan into Lucci's chest. The impact shattered the Tower of Law itself, sending the leopard man crashing into the sea. The final sunset of the Mary. They rescued Robin, but the island was under a buster call. 10 marine battleships were leveling Eni's lobby to the ground. There was no escape. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed across the water. Jump into the sea. The Going Mary, moving on its own spirit, had sailed into the heart of the war zone to save them one last time. They leapt from the tower and onto the deck, escaping the fire. But the miracle had a price. Once they reached open water, the Mary's hull finally snapped in half. The ship had reached its limit. Under a golden sunset, Naruto held a torch to the ship's deck. Thank you for carrying us this far, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. As the ship sank into the depths, a tiny spirit of a shipwright, the Klaboterman, waved goodbye. Robin was finally home, but as the smoke cleared, Naruto looked at his Vivre card. It was almost entirely gone. Ace, Naruto whispered. He's at Marineford, and the execution is tomorrow. Chapter 24. The War of the Best. The world stood still. Every television screen from the East Blue to the Grand Line was fixed on one location, Marineford. The headquarters of the Navy had been transformed into a steel fortress. At the center of the crescent-shaped bay, high atop the execution platform, sat Portgas D. Ace, bound in heavy chains. My brother is there, Naruto said, his voice trembling not with fear, but with a simmering, uncontrollable rage. The Going Merry was gone, replaced by their new ship, the Thousand Sunny, but Naruto didn't even have time to admire it. He, Sasuke, and the crew had hitched a ride on a stolen marine battleship, breaching the Gate of Justice, just as the sea began to churn. The arrival of the Titans. The horizon exploded. Out of the water rose the Moby Dick, the flagship of the Whitebeard pirates. Standing at the prow was the strongest man in the world, Edward Newgate, his massive naginata vibrating with the power of the Gura Gura no Mi. My beloved son. Whitebeard's voice cracked the very air. Are you well? Old man, Ace screamed, tears hitting the wooden platform. But the Marines were ready. The three admirals, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akainu, sat on their thrones beneath the platform, looking down with cold indifference. Tens of thousands of elite soldiers stood ready. Then, falling from the sky like a comet, came the reinforcement no one expected. AC. Naruto plummeted from the clouds, his golden Zenko aura trailing behind him like a sunbeam. Beside him, Sasuke descended on the back of a summoned hawk, his Sharingan scanning the battlefield for the most efficient path to the platform. The battlefield of gods and monsters. Naruto slammed into the frozen bay, the ice shattering under his feet. He didn't wait for a plan. He began a dead sprint toward the platform, a golden blur cutting through waves of marine giants. Step aside, Naruto roared, his four tails of chakra swinging like whips, knocking back hundreds of soldiers at once. That's the whirlwind, boy, Admiral Kizaru drawled, his body turning into light. How scary. Kizaru appeared in front of Naruto, raising a glowing leg. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? Boom. Before the light could connect, a shadow flickered. Sasuke appeared, his Susanoo skeletal ribcage manifesting to block the kick. The shockwave sent a blast of wind across the bay. Naruto, keep moving. Sasuke gritted his teeth, the pressure of a marine admiral's power forcing him into the ice. I'll handle the light show. The red dog's cruelty. Naruto reached the base of the platform, but the air suddenly turned into a furnace. Admiral Akainu stood in his path, his right arm a bubbling mass of molten magma. You are the son of the Yellow Flash, a spark of the old era, Akainu growled, his gaze fixed on Naruto's heart. But today, that spark goes out. Akainu launched a great eruption of magma. Naruto countered with a massive Rasengan infused with the wind, trying to blow the heat away. The steam was blinding. Naruto's skin began to blister from the sheer temperature. I don't care about the era. Naruto yelled, his eyes turning into the cross shape of the sage fox. I'm here for my brother. Whitebeard, seeing the boy's resolve, slammed his fist into the air, cracking the space beside Akainu and forcing the admiral to defend himself. Go, brat, save your brother. The executioner's blade. High above, the executioners raised their blades. Execute Portgas D. Ace. Naruto's heart stopped. He was too far. Sasuke was pinned down. Whitebeard was surrounded. Stoop. Naruto let out a primal scream. A wave of Conqueror's haki, fused with the terrifying pressure of the Zenko, erupted from his body. The executioners collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Even the vice admirals stumbled. In that moment of silence, Naruto leapt. He soared over the ramparts, landing on the platform. With a single strike of Ashura, the seastone cuffs shattered. Ace stood up, his flames erupting into a pillar of fire that lit up the entire sky. Let's go, Naruto. Ace grinned, the two brothers standing back to back atop the center of the world. But as they began their escape, the Vivre card in Naruto's pocket didn't stop burning. It turned to ash. Naruto turned around just in time to see Akainu's magma fist driving toward a vulnerable Ace. No. Naruto threw himself forward, not to fight, but to shield. Chapter 25. The Death of a Legend. The battlefield of Marineford fell into a haunting, localized silence. The air smelled of burnt ozone and melting iron. Naruto had thrown himself between Ace and Admiral Akainu, his arms spread wide. But Ace, seeing the magma fist approaching his younger brother, moved even faster. Thud. The sound was sickening. Akainu's fist, a mass of molten rock, didn't hit Naruto. It drove straight through Ace's chest. Ace. Naruto's voice was a tiny, broken whisper. Ace coughed, a spray of blood hitting Naruto's cheek. He slumped forward, his body losing its internal heat as the magma consumed his life force. The Vivre card in Naruto's hand finally flickered and vanished into gray ash. The final words. Naruto caught his brother as they both fell to the ice. The chaos of the war raged around them, but for Naruto, the world had shrunk to this single, dying man in his arms. I'm sorry, Naruto, Ace wheezed, his eyes losing their focus. I couldn't let you die for me, you have a dream to finish. Shut up, Chopper. Where's Chopper? Naruto screamed, his hands trembling as he tried to stem the flow of blood that wouldn't stop. Ace reached up, his hand cold, and touched Naruto's face. Tell the old man, and the guys, thank you, for loving a good-for-nothing like me. With a final, shallow breath, Ace's head hit Naruto's shoulder. The flame user was gone. The breaking of the spirit. Naruto sat motionless, his eyes wide, his pupils shrinking into tiny dots. The whirlwind had stopped. For the first time in his life, Naruto's spirit didn't just bend, it shattered. Akainu raised his fist again, cold and merciless. Now, the son of the Flash joins the son of Roger. Die. But Akainu never landed the blow. Whitebeard appeared behind him, his face a mask of primal fury. The strongest man in the world unleashed a quake that literally split the island of Marineford in half, sending Akainu tumbling into the abyss. Sasuke arrived at Naruto's side, his Susanoo flickering. He looked at Ace's body, then at Naruto. Naruto, we have to move. Now. Naruto didn't answer. A dark, oily chakra began to seep out of his pores. It wasn't the golden light of the Zenko or the red heat of the fox. It was something else, the void. The Whitebeard's final stand. Whitebeard stood alone against the entire marine force, shielding his children as they retreated. He took hundreds of wounds, bullets, cannonballs, and stabs, but he refused to fall. The One Piece is real. Whitebeard's final roar echoed across the ocean, a declaration that changed the world forever. He died standing up, a monument of a man who had never turned his back on a fight. But the tragedy wasn't over. Blackbeard appeared, stealing Whitebeard's power and plunging the world into further darkness. The awakening of the shadow. As the Law's submarine emerged to rescue the survivors, Naruto finally stood up. He didn't look like himself. His hair had turned a dull, ashy blonde, and his eyes were void of any light. You took him, Naruto said, his voice echoing with 1,000 overlapping shadows. He looked at the marine headquarters. He didn't use a Rasengan. He simply raised his hand, and the gravitational pressure of the Zenko's ultimate form, the singularity, crushed the main tower into a ball of scrap metal. Naruto, stop. Sasuke grabbed him, his own Sharingan bleeding from the effort. If you do this now, you'll destroy yourself. We aren't strong enough yet. Jinbei, the warlord of the sea, grabbed Naruto and forced him toward the submarine. Live, boy. Ace died so you could live. Don't waste his sacrifice on a suicide run. The 2-year vow. Weeks later, on a secluded island in the calm belt, Naruto sat under a tree, staring at the sea. He had lost everything: his brother, his ship, and his confidence. Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King, approached him along with Sasuke. You have a choice, Naruto, Rayleigh said. You can go back to the sea now and die. Or, you can stop. You can train. You can master the beast within and the haki that sleeps in your soul. Naruto looked at his hand, then at the X mark on his wrist. He picked up a piece of stone and carved a message on a piece of wood for his crew to see in the newspapers. 3D2Y. Not 3 days. 2 years. 2 years, Naruto said, his eyes finally regaining a flicker of their old blue fire. In 2 years, I won't just be a pirate. I'll be the storm that clears the world. Chapter 26. The Return to Sabayati. 2 years had passed since the bells of Marineford rang for the end of an era. The world had changed. The worst generation had carved a path of blood through the new world, but the whirlwind pirates had remained ghosts. On the island of Sabayati, the air was thick with the scent of bubble resin and anticipation. A man wearing a tattered cloak walked through the grove, a massive straw hat shadowing his eyes. He didn't look like the loud-mouthed boy who had left. He was broader, his presence so heavy that birds stopped chirping as he passed. The fake and the real. In a local tavern, a group of imposters was claiming to be the legendary Naruto and his crew, bullying the locals. "I'm the 15 million berry man, Naruto Uzumaki." The fake roared, pointing a pistol at a civilian. The cloaked man stopped. 15 million. He whispered. His voice was deeper, carrying the resonance of a mountain. That was a long time ago. The fake turned, snarling. "Who are you, trash?" Naruto didn't even draw his sword. He didn't move a muscle. He simply let out a tiny, controlled pulse of conqueror's haki. The entire tavern, the fakes, the thugs, and even the glass bottles, collapsed instantly. "I'm late for a meeting," Naruto said, stepping over the unconscious bodies. The reunion of the monsters. At Grove 42, the Thousand Sunny sat waiting, guarded for 2 years by the former warlord Kuma and the Duval Riders. One by one, the crew emerged from the shadows. Nami arrived with weather sorcery that could command the clouds. Sanji returned with legs that could burn even underwater. Chopper had mastered his transformations, and Robin had delved into the darkest secrets of the world. Then, a flicker of blue lightning signaled the arrival of the second in command. Sasuke stepped onto the deck, his cloak billowing. His Sharingan had evolved, and a new, mysterious ripple pattern, the Rinnegan, faintly shimmered in his left eye. "You've changed, Naruto," Sasuke said, a rare, small smirk appearing. "And you've gotten broody," Naruto laughed, the old spark finally returning to his eyes. "Where's the rest?" "Right here, Captain," Brook shouted, his soul literally flying through the air. The Marine blockade. The Marines, alerted to the crew's return, sent 2 pacifistas, the cyborg weapons that had nearly wiped them out 2 years ago, to the grove. Target identified. Naruto Uzumaki. Execute. The machines droned, charging their laser beams. 2 years ago, the entire crew couldn't scratch one of these. Now, Naruto just sighed. He tapped into the Sage Zenko mode. His eyes turned a piercing gold and blue cross, and a thin, elegant cloak of white chakra draped over his shoulders. Sage Art. Rasengan. With a speed that bypassed the cyborg's sensors, Naruto appeared between them. He didn't slam the attack into them, he simply let the rotating energy expand. Both pacifistas exploded into scrap metal in a single second. Sasuke, not to be outdone, unsheathed his new blade. Chidori. Sharp spear. A bolt of lightning cut a marine battleship in half from a mile away. The path to the new world. The Thousand Sunny was coated in a shimmering bubble, ready to dive 10,000 meters under the sea to Fishman Island, the gateway to the new world. As the ship began to sink beneath the waves, escaping the marine reinforcements, Naruto stood at the bow. He looked at the X on his wrist and then at the burning sun reflecting on the water. "Ace. Whitebeard. I'm going to finish what we started," Naruto vowed. "The new world belongs to the dreamers." "Course set, Captain," Nami shouted, her eyes on the deep-sea currents. "All right, everyone," Naruto yelled, his voice echoing across the harbor. "Next stop. The bottom of the ocean. Let's go." But deep in the dark trenches below, an ancient evil was stirring, the new Fishman pirates, and beyond them, the shadow of the 4 emperors. The whirlwind was back, but the sea was about to get much, much deeper. Chapter 27. The Sun and the Sea. The Thousand Sunny descended into the crushing depths of the midnight sea. Surrounded by a shimmering bubble, the crew watched as colossal sea kings drifted past like living mountains. Finally, they saw it, a massive, glowing bubble at the bottom of the ocean floor. Fishman Island, a kingdom of coral and light. "It's beautiful," Nami whispered. But the beauty was a mask for deep-seated hatred. The island was on the verge of civil war. Horty Jones, a radical fishman fueled by energy steroids and a fanatical hatred of humans, had staged a coup. He stood in the Gyeongkord Plaza with an army of 100,000 soldiers, ready to execute the royal family and plunge the world into racial war. The Plaza of Hatred. Look at them, Horty sneered, pointing his trident at the captured King Neptune. Humans are inferior. Today, we wash the sea clean of their filth. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over the plaza. The Thousand Sunny didn't just dock, it burst through the internal currents, landing with a thunderous crash right in the center of the enemy lines. The dust cleared. Naruto, Sasuke, and the rest of the crew stood in a line, facing the 100,000-strong army. Who are you? Horty roared. Why would humans interfere in our history? Naruto took a step forward. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't even take a fighting stance. He just looked at the massive army with a calm, pitying expression. History isn't an excuse to be a jerk, Naruto said. And you're just a bully hiding behind a drug. The power of the king. The 100,000 soldiers charged, a sea of screaming warriors. Step back, Naruto told his crew. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When they snapped open, a shockwave of conqueror's haki, infused with the primal authority of the Zenko sage, rippled outward. It wasn't a physical blast, it was a weight on the soul. In an instant, 50,000 soldiers fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth and unconscious. The silence that followed was deafening. 50,000, Horty stammered, his eyes bulging. In a second. If I were the old Naruto, I would have yelled at you, Naruto said, his golden chakra cloak beginning to manifest. But now, I'm just going to stop you. The sage and the shark. Sasuke moved like a ghost, his Rinnegan allowing him to swap places with enemy weapons. He didn't even break a sweat, dismantling the elite officers with single, precise strikes of his lightning-clad blade. Naruto faced Horty, who had transformed into a bloated monster from overdosing on steroids. Horty threw a water shot, a drop of water that hit with the force of a cannonball. Naruto simply caught it in his hand. You use your strength to hurt your own people, Naruto said. Sage art. Planet Rasengan. Naruto didn't just hit Horty, he unleashed a miniature solar system of rotating chakra. The impact sent Horty flying through the plaza, through the coral walls, and straight into the dark abyss of the ocean floor. A new promise. With the rebellion crushed, the people of Fishman Island looked at the humans with a mix of fear and awe. But Naruto just smiled and helped the wounded. Queen Otahime wanted a world under the sun, Jinbei said, looking at Naruto. You've given us the first ray of light in a long time. Before leaving, Naruto stood before the massive ship, Noah, and made a vow. One day, I'll bring this whole island to the surface. I'll show you the real sun. That's my promise as a future king. As the Thousand Sunny began its final ascent toward the new world, Naruto looked at a message sent by a Den Den Mushi. It was a challenge from Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors. She's threatening my friends over some candy. Naruto laughed, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Tell her I'm coming. And tell her to bring her best appetite, because the new world is about to get a lot more spicy. They broke the surface, the sun of the new world shining brightly. The final stage was set. Chapter 28. The Frozen Lab. The new world did not welcome the Thousand Sunny with open arms, it welcomed them with a sea of fire and ice. The crew arrived at Punk Hazard, an island split perfectly down the middle, one half a volcanic furnace, the other a frozen wasteland. This place feels wrong, Sasuke said, his Rinnegan sensing a disturbance in the island's natural energy. The atmosphere is saturated with chemical waste. As they ventured into the frozen half, they were met by a bizarre sight, a man who was nothing but a pair of floating legs, and a group of children who were unnaturally giant. The island was the secret laboratory of Caesar Clown, a mad scientist producing, sad, the essential ingredient for Smile artificial devil fruits. The Surgeon of Death. In the heart of the blizzard, a figure emerged from the shadows of a metallic laboratory. He wore a spotted fur hat and carried a massive nodashi. This was Trafalgar Law, a member of the worst generation, and a former warlord. Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, Law said, his voice as sharp as a scalpel. If you stay here, you'll be crushed by the gears of the new world. But if you want to take down a four emperor, I have a plan. Naruto crossed his arms, his golden cloak flickering. Which one? Kaido of the beasts, Law replied. But first, we have to cut off his supply. We take Caesar, we destroy the factory, and we throw the world into chaos. The slime and the shinobi. The mission turned into a race against time. Caesar unleashed Shinokuni, a massive cloud of poisonous gas that turned anyone it touched into a stone statue. While the crew fought off Caesar's hazard soldiers, Sasuke found himself face to face with Virgo, a high-ranking marine who was secretly a mole for the warlord Don Quixote Doflamingo. Virgo's haki was so dense his skin turned into polished black iron. You think your eyes can save you? Virgo growled, swinging a bamboo pole reinforced with haki. Sasuke didn't even activate his Susanoo. He channeled his Rinnegan's power. Amenetejikara. In the blink of an eye, Sasuke swapped places with Virgo's own weapon. Before the mole could react, Sasuke's blade, coated in black chidori, sliced through Virgo's indestructible haki like it was silk. The gas mask shattered. Meanwhile, Naruto chased Caesar into the central lab. The scientist laughed, flying through the air as a cloud of purple gas. I am oxygen itself. You can't breathe if I don't let you. Caesar sucked the air out of the room, causing Naruto to stumble. But Naruto didn't need to breathe to win, he needed to strike. I've dealt with guys like you, people who treat lives like experiments, Naruto growled. He compressed a massive amount of wind into his fingertips. Sage art. Vacuum bullet. The wind strike didn't just hit Caesar, it created a localized atmospheric pressure that crushed the gas man back into a solid form. Naruto lunged, his fist glowing with the concentrated heat of the Zenko. Grizzly Magnum. Sage Edition. The punch sent Caesar through the reinforced steel walls of the lab and out into the ocean, where Law's submarine was waiting to kidnap him. The Joker's shadow. As the crew gathered on the shore, celebrating with a giant pot of stolen soup, the sky darkened. A man with pink feathers and a permanent, sadistic grin appeared on the horizon. Doflamingo, the Joker, was coming to reclaim his scientist. The alliance is formed, Law said, looking at Naruto and Sasuke. But the next island is Dressrosa. It's Doflamingo's kingdom, a land of toys, gladiators, and secrets that will burn the world. Naruto stood up, looking at the distant horizon where the Joker's laughter seemed to echo in the wind. Toys and secrets. Sounds like a place that needs a little sunlight. Chapter 29. The Birdcage of Dressrosa. The island of Dressrosa was a paradise of fragrance and music, but beneath the surface, it was a horror show. Half the population had been turned into living toys, forced to work while their loved ones forgot they ever existed. This place smells like rotten shadows, Sasuke remarked, his Sharingan piercing through the illusions of the city. The crew split up. While Law and Naruto went to deliver Caesar to the Joker, Sasuke found himself drawn to the Kurita Coliseum. There, the prize for the victor was the Mara Mara no Mi, the late Ace's flame fruit. The return of the Sabo. Inside the arena, Naruto encountered a mysterious gladiator in a top hat. Before Naruto could speak, the man pinned him in a hug. I thought I lost both of you that day, the man whispered. It was Sabo, Naruto's long-lost brother and the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army. With Sabo taking Naruto's place in the arena to reclaim Ace's fruit, Naruto and Sasuke headed for the royal palace to face the man pulling the strings, Don Quixote Doflamingo. The Weaver of Fate. Doflamingo stood on the balcony, his pink feathered coat fluttering like the wings of a predatory bird. You've caused quite a mess, Uzumaki. But here, I am the law. I am the god of this birdcage. Doflamingo swept his hand across the air, and thousands of invisible, razor-sharp strings descended. Birdcage. A dome of indestructible wire surrounded the entire island, slowly shrinking, slicing through buildings and people alike. Panic erupted. You talk too much, Sasuke said, stepping forward. He activated his perfect Susanoo, a towering samurai of purple chakra that stood as tall as the palace itself. Let's see if your strings can hold a god of the Uchiha. Fourth gear, the Zenko overdrive. Naruto, however, was facing Doflamingo's awakened strings, which turned the very ground into silk. Naruto realized that his standard Sage mode wasn't fast enough to bypass Doflamingo's reflexes. I have to go higher, Naruto muttered. He bit his thumb and slammed it into his chest, forcing the Zenko's chakra to circulate at a lethal velocity. Zenko overdrive. Fourth gear. Naruto's body didn't just glow, it expanded with compressed muscle and heat. He became a bounce man of golden fire. Zenko Zenko. King Kong gun. Naruto's fist retracted into his arm like a spring and fired with the force of a nuclear blast. Doflamingo countered with his 16 holy bullets, but the golden pressure was too much. The strings snapped. The Joker was sent crashing through the center of the city, his sunglasses finally shattering. The final collapse. As Doflamingo fell unconscious, the birdcage vanished. The toys turned back into humans, and years of suppressed memories flooded the island. The citizens wept, not in pain, but in relief. But amidst the celebration, Sasuke looked at the horizon. His Rinnegan was pulsing. Naruto, the alliance was just the beginning. The four emperors aren't waiting anymore. A massive shadow appeared over the ocean. It wasn't a ship, it was an island-sized elephant, Zo. And following it was a fleet that dwarfed anything they had seen before. The throne wars have begun, Sabo said, standing beside his brothers. And the world is about to find out who the real king is. Chapter 30. The Dawn of the New World. The final stretch of the Grand Line was not a sea of water, but a sea of history. The Thousand Sunny sailed through the thickest fog in the world, guided by the four red poneglyphs that Robin had finally deciphered. At the helm stood Naruto, his eyes fixed forward. Beside him, Sasuke felt the spatial distortion of the final island, Laugh Tale. But they were not alone. The horizon was a graveyard of ships. The Yonko had fallen, Big Mom and Kaido were defeated, but one final obstacle remained. Emerging from the fog was the saber of Zebek, the ship of Blackbeard. And behind it, the entire marine fleet led by Fleet Admiral Akainu, determined to bury the greatest sin of history. The three-way war. This is it, Sasuke. Naruto yelled over the roaring wind. The end of the road. Then let's finish it, Sasuke replied. The battle was a cataclysm. Sasuke's perfect Susanoo clashed with the tremors of Blackbeard's stolen Quake fruit, while Naruto entered his ultimate form, the Sage of the Nine Heavens. He wasn't just using the Zenko, he had harmonized with the spirit of the sea itself. Blackbeard laughed, his darkness swallowing the light. The One Piece is mine, Uzumaki. I will rule the void. The void has no room for dreams. Naruto countered. He charged a planetary-tailed beast Rasenshuriken, the winds of the Grand Line swirling into a vortex that could split a continent. With a final, desperate clash, Naruto's light pierced Blackbeard's darkness, while Sasuke's Amaterasu-infused blade cut through Akainu's magma once and for all. The old world, built on secrets and blood, finally crumbled. The treasure of Joy Boy. The crew stepped onto the shores of Laugh Tale. It wasn't a mountain of gold or a hoard of jewels. It was a simple stone tablet, a message left by Joy Boy, and the final piece of the puzzle, a mechanism that would destroy the Red Line and unite the four seas into the All Blue. So that's it, Robin whispered, tears in her eyes. The world was never meant to be divided. Naruto looked at the horizon. He didn't just see a treasure, he saw a bridge. He used the combined power of the ancient weapons and his own Zenko energy to trigger the final event. Crack. The red line shattered. The world groaned as the walls between the people fell. The One Piece wasn't an object, it was the world itself, finally made whole. The King's Banquet. Months later, a party was held that spanned the entire globe. From the forests of Wano to the deserts of Alabasta, people were eating, laughing, and dancing together. Naruto sat on the figurehead of the Thousand Sunny, looking at his bounty poster. It no longer had a number. It simply said, "Wanted, the king." "So, what now, king?" Sasuke asked, leaning against the mast. "You've united the world. You've brought the dawn. Are you going to settle down?" Naruto looked at the endless blue horizon, where new islands were appearing as the sea level stabilized. He adjusted his straw hat and flashed that familiar, fox-like grin. "Settle down. Are you kidding, Sasuke?" Naruto stood up and pointed toward the unknown. "There are still people out there who haven't heard a good joke yet. And I hear there's a whole other moon with people living on it." Sasuke sighed, but he couldn't hide his smile. HMPH. I knew you'd say that. The legacy. As the Thousand Sunny sailed into the rising sun, the narrator's voice echoed. Inherited will, the destiny of the age, and the dreams of the people. As long as people continue to seek the meaning of freedom, these things will never cease to be. Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who carried a beast, and Sasuke Uchiha, the man who walked through shadows, had changed the world. Not as gods, but as friends.